And good morning. Welcome to the 2023 CARTA Conference. Dignitaries, special guests, colleagues, country men and women, continent men and women, and global public health men and women. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Thank you for joining us at this event. It is a significant event. It's been a long time in the making. And I really want to say thank you for being here, for sharing your time with us. This is the second day of a two-day event. Yesterday we saw the School of Public Health CARTA Research Day. I'm sure you all will agree that it was a wonderful day. It was a huge success. We heard some great keynotes, we had plenaries, we had discussions. We were privy to some amazing research that's taking place on the continent. And we had a chance to meet and greet with some familiar faces and some faces that we only ever see on email or on Zoom. So if you didn't have a chance to network with anybody and say hi to those familiar faces, I've got some good news for you today. There's another chance for you to network, meet and greet, and say hi to the familiar faces. But at this stage, I want to welcome the VCs from all our partner institutions. They're sitting in the front. Thank you very much for joining us. I know that you're very busy. I also want to welcome the deans and assistant deans, heads of schools, and the representatives from our funders. My name is Candice Bailey. I work for the Conversation Africa. We are a media partner for this event. And I'm going to do my two little advert to tell you that the Conversation is a platform that takes academic research and profiles it in the public domain in a way that ordinary, non-scientist audiences can understand. I'd love to have a chat with any of you today who want to talk about the Conversation, how you can profile your research with us. But for now, I'm just the MC, so I'm going to walk us through the day and make sure that we keep the time. I've got a few logistical announcements before I can get going. So there are a few changes to our program. The first change is that everything is going to be happening in the auditorium. There's going to be no sessions in the resource center any longer. The resource center is where we will have our main lunch. It's a served lunch this afternoon at 1 o'clock. But for now, everything will happen in the auditorium. Tea will be served outside the auditorium to the right. If we go out to the right, is where tea will be served. The bathrooms are also there. And the administrative announcement from Prof. Sharon is that the CPD register is outside for signing. And those who know that they need to sign the CPD register. So please do what you need to do before the end of the day. Now, colleagues, the CARTA conference today is meant to acknowledge a very special milestone in the CARTA calendar. 10 cohorts of CARTA PhD programs that have come through and 10 years of CARTA. I'm not going to tell you too much more about it because I'm going to hand over to Professor Sharon Von, who's going to give us a welcome, an official welcome, an overview, and she's probably going to tell us a bit more about that. But she's also going to introduce us to our keynote speaker, Professor Alex Izza. Just to let you know, there will be a Q&A after Prof. Izza's discussion, so keep your questions ready. For the audiences that are online, you will also be able to have questions, so we will check online for your questions. So please enjoy the next session, and I will be back later.
Thank you, Candice. And a very warm welcome to everybody who is here. I think for all of us, it's been a wonderful opportunity to see people we haven't seen for a long time. And it's really, really, really inspiring. As you know, we are both live streaming, and we are in the room, and we are in South Africa. So we should all relax with the vagaries of electricity supply when things come and go, and there might be a few interruptions here and there. So we'll all just relax into that. I've just returned from Nigeria, and they taught me that you get on with it. And they get on with it with warmth. It's always a wonderful place, although I did notice that the Nigerian grid had collapsed this morning. So our thoughts to our colleagues in Nigeria who are suffering under that. I think that all of today you will get more and more information about the Consortium for Advanced Research Training in Africa. But it's an institution building initiative, and you will see the various components of it today. Basically, it's our contribution to making a change in Africa, a positive contribution to academia, a positive contribution to universities, and a positive contribution to society through research and action. My job today is, at this moment, is to introduce to you Professor Alex Eze. For those of us who are part of the CARTA community, he needs no introduction. Alex was one of the founding directors of the Consortium for Advanced Research Training in Africa, and he was also the founding director of the African Population Health Research Center, which co-leads CARTA with the University of the Witwatersrand. One of the marks of a good leader is that when you leave, especially founding leaders, when you leave, the institutions that you've built carry on without you. That is certainly true of CARTA, but I must say it's true of APHRC as well, and the current director, Catherine, who I have the pleasure of co-leading CARTA with. Well, she might have just outdone Alex. And APHRC is healthy, thriving, and an amazing research center in Africa, and the #1 think tank in Africa. And it's not by chance that the two institutions lead CARTA. It was a very conscious decision of bringing together African research centers and African universities. You'll hear more about that as we go on. I trust that everyone online can hear and is with us. The chat is there and there is someone monitoring it, so please let us know if there are any problems. And then I have the opportunity to introduce a colleague, someone I really respect both academically and very happily for me, a friend. Alex is currently Professor of Global Health at the Dornsife School of Public Health at Drexel University. And he works on urban health, on population change, and models to strengthen knowledge-based institutions, something he started with in CARTA and has been taking forward ever since. He is an incredibly influential person in the sense that he brings science and knowledge and marshals that to make arguments. And he has been recognized for this in many ways. I have something to read because if I just spoke of my knowledge of him, I would go on much too long. He serves on numerous international and non-profit boards, including the UN High-Level Advisory Board on Economic and Social Affairs, and he currently co-chairs a new Lancet Commission on adolescent health and well-being. And there's some networking that could be done, as I know, in this room on that issue. He's received the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine and the Royal Society for Tropical Medicine and Hygiene 2020 George MacDonald Medal and the World Academy of Sciences 2018 Prize for Social Sciences. He holds a PhD and he has been the recipient of 2 honorary doctorates. He's smart and he used those smarts for making a difference, and it's an enormous pleasure to welcome Alex to speak on, I think, a very important issue, and that is the divergent demographic experiences in the 21st century. Everyone's talking about population, but the implications for African and other low and middle income countries. Alex, thank you and welcome.
Good morning. You can do better than that. Okay, good morning. It's really awesome to be here and to see many friends that I've not seen since COVID started in 2019. And to invite me to this great event, I think in 2018, are you hearing me? Yes. Okay, sure. In 2008, when we started thinking about CARTA, it was like a dream. But today, I think CARTA is living that dream in a very significant way. And I want to just reassure you that dreams do come true. So dare to dream of a better future for your university, for your country, for Africa, and we can make it happen. So the issue I want to talk about today is something that is dear to me because in many ways we are at a particular point in time that population as a global concern has lost most of its relevance in terms of global development and discourses. If you think about Malthus in the 1790 when he wrote the Treatise on Population, or you think about Ehrlich, Paul Ehrlich in the 1968 when he wrote the Population Bomb, population issues was a central theme of global development. Throughout the second half of the 20th century, from about 1950 to the end of the 1999 and 2000, you really could not think of many things that happened without thinking about population in terms of development. But we are at a particular point now where those issues are somewhat off, and we need to be able to understand what's going on. So today, I would like to focus on just talking about what these trends look like globally. And then I would come back to say, what does it mean for Africa? And hopefully, you will take out a number of things from this call, from this discussion that would matter. And I think we will have an opportunity to answer some questions. So, the key point of my presentation today, I think we are at a very distinct point of divergent demographic trajectories and experiences, especially in the low middle-income countries. And sometimes I would call them Global South, or use other acronyms, because these things, they don't really mean a lot in terms of what is Global North, what is Global South, what is the developing country, what is the developed country, and there are, so allow me to use those terms in that general form. But what I really mean when I think about the Global South or low and middle income countries is all the countries that are outside of Europe, North America, particularly the US and Canada and Australia and New Zealand. And you can add Japan to the mix. So every other thing outside of those maybe in some ways relate to what I'm talking about. So as of 2022, the UN released their 2022 revision of the World Population Prospects. And that showed that as of 2022, there were about 131 countries where the rate of growth of their population is at least 0.69% or higher. At 0.69%, what happens is that the population will double every 100 years. And throughout the 500 years of European experience, a population that doubles every 100 years is seen as sustainable in many ways. So at that rate of growth, we've seen that about 131 countries as of last year, we are growing at those rates. And that will go from 0.69 to almost like 3, 4, 5%. And if you look at places where there might be wars and refugees moving in and out, it might even be 18% and all of those. But that's really a very significant point, because from that point going forward, the number of countries that will be growing at those rates will continue to diminish. And as of the end of this century, in 2100, there will be only 3 countries in the whole world that will have growth rates of 0.69% or higher. That would be Niger at 1.01%, Mayotte at 0.85%, and Senegal at 0.75%. in the rest of the world, the 235 plus countries and territories that are included in the UN projections, the rate of growth will be below that. But at the same time, we are seeing another trajectory that is going on, which is the number of countries that are experiencing population decline. As of last year, that number was 41 countries. But the number of countries that will continue to experience declining population will continue to grow. And by the end of this century, there will be at least 154 countries that will have negative growth. Of course, when we think about population decline, we don't actually talk about population decline, we talk about aging. And when you talk about aging, it is a very positive thing because people are living longer. And we now think about how do we make old age more better, so you have healthy aging and you have a care economy that will ensure that pension systems work and all of those. But what I want you to understand, that bear that in mind for a moment, that a lot of the conversations around population decline has focused on aging. But that narrative is an exclusively European thinking and model that has very little relevance to low and middle income countries. So I want to just spend some time and ask, why is it that the current narrative on population aging misses the point when it comes to low and middle income countries? The first is the fact that if you think about population decline in low and middle income countries, for instance, one of the things you will notice is that for Europe and most of North America, the countries I've talked in the global north, their population, the peak of their population was like in France, 1720s. In the UK, it was 1820s. That was when their fertility was around 5.7 children per woman. And it dropped up by the 1940s. It was below replacement. So it took the UK 120 years to move from the peak of their fertility to a below replacement level fertility. It took France more than 200 years to achieve that. For many low and middle income countries, they've been able to achieve that same outcome in a space of 20, 30, or 40 years. So as their fertility declined rapidly, their population will also age rapidly. But the thing about Europe is the fact that as their population was aging, they've had hundreds of years to adapt systems and policies and strategies to mitigate the implications and the consequences of population decline. And one of those is immigration policies that will attract young people from poorer countries into these countries. So in that way, they are able to mitigate those. Poorer countries and low and middle income countries do not have that benefit of being able to attract immigrants into their countries. But more importantly, they will also be faced with the out-migration of their young people. So when you bring these factors together, what you will see is a very fast decline in the populations of low and middle income countries. But there is also something that might be going on, which is the fact that as population declines, one of the things you will notice is that there is a change in the age structure of the population from a pyramid to a funnel. And when you have that change, it creates what we call reverse momentum for decline. When you have a population pyramid, one of the things that sustains the fast growth, the faster growth of those populations is what we call the momentum for growth. Because every younger base of the pyramid is larger than the ones above. So when you think about women 15 to 49, those who are 15 to 19 are many times larger than those who are 45 to 49. So the number of women giving birth will continue to expand. And so the number of children being born will continue to be larger. But when you have a funnel, the base is smaller than the ones above it. And so you have smaller cohorts of women coming into childbearing ages than those leaving the childbearing age. And I will explain that in a moment. So that may also drive those changes. Now, but there is also something that is going on, which is the fact that even though we know that populations in these countries are declining, the way they have been projected to decline, they will actually decline much faster than they are projected to decline. And in the countries that are growing fast, they are actually growing faster than they are projected. So the current projections of the UN system is appropriate for high-income countries, but actually misses the boat when it comes to low and middle-income countries. And the last point I want to touch on is the fact that the implications of population decline goes beyond aging and the care economy. It affects every aspect of society, and we need to recognize that in order to be able to develop coherent policies to address some of those. So let me try and see the points that I've made, give you some evidence to demonstrate what these things mean. So as I said, that low and middle income countries will generally face a much faster rate of decline in their fertility. And because of that, their population will decline much faster. So here I show in the solid lines the total fertility rates of the UK and Jamaica. And this is from 1950 to 2100. What you will see in that is that the UK reached below replacement level fertility of 2 children per woman in 1944. Jamaica, as of 1965, had a total fertility rate of about 5.7 children per woman. Within a space of 40 years, by 2005, their fertility has dropped below 2. So it was a very fast decline. The UN projects that between now and end of this century, 2100, the total fertility rates in Jamaica and in the United Kingdom will vary between 1.4 children per woman and 1.6 children per woman. That means there's actually no difference in their fertility. But if you look at the rate of growth or the rate of decline of these populations, which is in the dotted line, what you see is that from now, Jamaica will enter a phase of very sustained decline in their population. By 2100, the rate of decline in Jamaica's population will be 3.3% negative. That means the population will drop by 50% every, like, say, every 25 or 28 years. Now, by 2100, the rate of decline in Jamaica will be 42 times faster than the UK. Just to understand that in numbers. The UK population in 2022, last year, was 67.5 million people. By 2100, the UK will be 70.5 million people. So their population will actually increase. Jamaica was 2.89 million people. By 2100, it will be 897,000 people. That's a 70% drop in its population from 2022 to 2100. So even if aging is not an issue, even if population decline is not an issue for the UK, it is a consequential issue for Jamaica and many other poorer countries that are facing this tsunami of massive changes in their population trajectory. Are you with me? Okay. So, I also made a point that in the countries that are declining, the current models do not actually capture that rate of decline. This is an example of South Korea, and it shows different projections of the UN in 1996 in green and 2010 in orange, 2019 in blue, and 2022 in red. What it shows is that if you compare the 3-year period between 2019 and the 2022 estimates, the population of South Korea will actually drop by another 20% from how it was projected to drop just 3 years before. So the population is about 54 million people now. By 2100, it's projected to be about 24 million. And what is driving that change? I've done some work to suggest that actually there's one major factor that is not being factored in, which is age at first birth, mean age at first birth, which determines the gap between the generation of mothers and daughters. In places with high fertility, women marry early and start childbearing early, like in Niger at 18, mean age at first birth is 18. In South Korea or in places like Ireland and Spain and others, is about 32 years. So even if you have the same level of fertility, women have exactly the same number of children. Mortality rates are the same. In 90 years, in a place like Niger, you have 5 generations of people. In a place like South Korea, you have 3 generations of people. So simply starting early, irrespective of all the other factors that happens, causes your population to grow much faster. And starting late causes your population to decline much faster. But there is another thing that's going on, which is what I talked about, the reverse momentum for growth. This is the population age structure of South Korea from 1950 to 2100. By 1985, there was a significant shift in the population structure of South Korea, that it moved from being a pyramid as it was in the 1950s to a funnel. And that funnel is, the base of it is tapering off increasingly as you move forward. Let me give you what that means in essence. Let's look at this slide. In 2000, there were about 13.5 million women of childbearing age in South Korea. By 2100, there will be only 3.4 million women aged 15 to 49. Even if you triple their fertility, it will still be much smaller than what you have. And that's the future that is being painted. So I also, and again, so you think about the number of births. In the 1950s and 60s, it was over 1 million births. That's in the red line there. Over 1 million births a year. That has dropped now to about 288,000 a year. By 2100, it will be about 143,000 births a year in the country. So that's the trajectory they are on. But I also made the point that the implications of population decline goes beyond aging and the care economy. And let me just show you this, because what happens when fertility drops and you get to 1 child per woman or less than 1.5 children per woman, and in a place like this is with respect to East Asia, where there is a very strong tradition of some preference, and you have access to ultrasound technology, you have a huge deficit of girls to boys. A 14 percentage point difference in the number of girls to boys in this setting. You can think about what does that mean for marriage markets, for men and the aggression and all of those, and for relationships and all that. You know, it is, but we don't think about those. You think about, I read recently that in Japan and Spain and Italy, one of their major social problems today is vacant housing. So when a city that's 10 million people drops to 5 million people, what happens to the built environment? You might think that, okay, with the decline, people in rural areas will disappear. But how do you manage the ecosystem and the forests and lands in those areas? What if there is a fire? All of those. So there are massive issues that this decline could result in that we don't pay attention to and we have not been talking about. So I've given you examples from outside of Africa, and the basic question one will be asking is, but what does this mean for Africa? We are still growing very fast. Catherine gave the statistics yesterday. We are 1.4 billion people today, and we're going to be 2.5, and we're going to be 4 billion people and all that. So why do we need to be concerned about this? I'll give you 2 reasons. First is the fact that because at the global scene, we've seen that the population factor, the mean number of children per woman globally is really around the replacement level, 2.4 children per woman. And we think that the population problem is solved. And because of the climate crisis, we also see that a declining population is actually a good thing. And when we frame it in the context of aging, we also make it that it is a very beautiful thing because we are living longer and we need to make sure that people are living healthier. So when you have a global attention to population that has moved away from thinking about population growth as a problem. And you have Africa, where there are still countries that are doubling every 18 to 20 years. We know that most of the investments in family planning programs, for instance, in African countries have come from outside. So what happens when those dry up? Women in Africa will lack the opportunity to meet their own reproductive goals and aspirations. And this population growth will then continue to create huge challenges for the continent. But not only that, there is also the thinking that maybe the population growth in Africa is good for the world, because Africa will be home to the largest number of workers, and they can then be drawn to other places to serve and work for them and all of those. And the challenge there is that when you do that, it's almost like thinking that the growth in Africa, particularly when we don't have the means to invest in the human capital, in education and health and all of those to create decent, high-quality populations in Africa, then we are having a group that becomes what I will term the hewers of wood and the drawers of water for the rest of the world. And if that's the future we want of Africa, then that's okay. But if that's not the future we want, then it means that we need to be able to pay attention and think, what do these things mean for us? And for me, I think this is very critical, because when you take a place, and I'll get back to a place like Niger and others and talk about that. But we're already seeing this type of immigration policies there with targeted programs that attract young people. You think about it, African countries are very poor countries, but we have the highest disease burden. We have the largest population to healthcare provider ratio in the world, but we train most of the healthcare workers that's working in Europe today. We invest those resources and we train them. And there's no conversations around what this means. And so, as we think through this, what do this mean? I think you also have to recognize that as countries move into this phase of thinking about what can they do to improve fertility in their countries, and these are the donor countries that support family planning programs and all of those, it raises moral and ethical questions. How do you advance pronatalist policies at home and family planning programs overseas? So there are huge conversations, and it's making entities like the UN unable to actually create a coherent narrative and discussion around how you manage these issues. But if we have a process that is really not allowing us to invest in our human capital and where our young people live and all of those, it undermines Africa's current and future competitiveness, particularly as the global economy becomes dominated by knowledge systems and knowledge economy. So here's an example of Niger that shows that every single time the UN releases their projections, the projected size of Niger goes further than it was projected to be. And if you look at previous projections, like say from 1996 to where the population should be in 2020, and you look at the more recent ones and say, where was the population in 2020? Actually, Niger is 24%, growing at 24% faster than it was projected to grow. So when you expand this to other countries on the continent, what you're going to be seeing is that the population of Africa may not be 4 billion by 2100. It might be 5 or 6 billion. And you might be more than 50% of the global population. Because as others are declining faster than they are projected to decline, and you're growing faster than you are projected to grow, that's what happens. But the consequence of this is this. If Niger, growing at 3.7%, doubles every 18 years, even if you take away corruption, there is no way for the government to make the necessary investments in health, education, nutrition, jobs, and all that to support that rate of growth of the population. And what will happen? Expectations would not be met. Current levels of these services that are inadequate will continue to deteriorate. And as they do, the central governance, it doesn't matter whether it is military, dictatorship, or democracy, will begin to crumble. And these are real challenges for the future of the continent, and we need to think about. I want to end by thinking, what can we do? And how do we address these issues from ourselves? First is to recognize that the European and high-income country models of population change are inadequate for low and middle-income countries. If we recognize that, then we need to be thinking, how do we then create new models that represent the realities that we face in these settings, and then be able to develop new theories and new approaches that can then give us a much better understanding of the trajectories we are on. And I think that the discussions about negative population growth must go beyond aging and the care economy. It must begin to address decline as an issue, particularly in low and middle income countries, because it is an existential threat for many countries in the global south. The diversity of demographic experiences calls for an honest and well-reasoned approach to address both continuing rapid growth in some regions and rapid decline in others. We are in a global community, and it is important that we recognize some of these diversities and be able to reconcile them. How is it possible that South Korea could spend $200 billion over the last 16 years to try to bring up their fertility at home, but can also support family planning programs in Niger, for instance? Can we reconcile those and ensure that they are actually important? But I think also, as we do this, there's been many mistakes that's been made when it comes to population in the past that we must be able to address and make sure that they are not repeated, so that the goal should be to ensure that there is no coercion and that individuals are making the choices on when and with whom and how many children to have, and all of those as enshrined in the ICPD program of action. Also, we need to invest in research that can help us to understand the implications of population decline. I gave the example of South Korea. You think about it, that what they are spending $200 billion on is to give cash benefits to families with children under one. But these families already have the child. What if you actually change the policy to changing norms in the society so that women do not have to decide between a career and a family? Or single women can decide to raise the children on their own, or that you actually, there are many different things that they could do. But the investment has been largely in South Korea today, you read it, there are many places that are, what they call it, it is, children are not allowed in those settings. If you have a child, you cannot, there are hotels you cannot go to. There are settings, children are not allowed. And these are the real society they are in, and they complain, why is our total fertility rate 0.78 now? That's what it is. And so, but without research and clarity on what these things will be, we will continue to throw money into the problem without solving the problem. This guy, Paul Morland, talked about the UK and that maybe they should tax single, childless couples and individuals. But why are young people not having children? Why are they starting childbearing late? So many of them are because they cannot afford to give to their children the type of lifestyle they had growing up. So what if the policy is actually about making childcare and housing more affordable to young people? Will it help them to start childbearing early? We don't, so there are multiple ways we can address these issues, but without research, we're actually shooting in the dark. So this course, in the 1950s, after the UN was set up, one of the things they did initially, between 1950 and 1969, was to set up population demographic centers in many of the developing regions, in Latin America, Asia, Africa, and all of those. By the 2000s, they've stopped funding all of them, like RIPS and IFOD in Africa, and IIPS in India, and they had one in Chile. Why? Because we think the population problem has been solved. But we are at the point where there are new challenges that actually may be much more significant than what we've seen in the past. And we are not ready or prepared for those. We need to begin to rethink some of the ideas that we have around population issues and concerns and what it means for us as a continent. I think our future is in many ways tied to how we manage and deal with this issue of the population and the way it is growing for the continent. But for me, I really feel for this conference and for the conversations that we are having is to recognize that without, when people talk about 4 billion Africans and it gives them the chill, I said, or they celebrate it, or they celebrate it. I said, it's really not, the question is not whether we are 3 billion or 2 billion or 4 billion or 6 billion. It's the question of what type of, or what quality of 6 billion or 4 billion or 3 billion Africans would that be by 2100? Would they be educated, healthy citizens who are contributing to the development of Africa and the rest of the world? Or would they be still dying trying to cross the Sahara Desert to get to Europe? I think what we do with the investments in this human capital development and all of those will be key to what that future population looks like. And I think at the rate many countries are growing today, we cannot achieve that. And we need to be able to pay attention and speak the truth to ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. A very interesting, complicated conversation, and pointing to the need to be having nuanced conversations instead of the one catchphrase, and really the problem of also how people use this in populist and racist or discriminatory ways, and the importance to underline the relationship between human rights and the individual free choice. Questions from the audience, comments, contributions. We have some roving mics right in the middle of the room, and then right at the back.
Thank you so much for your talk, Alex. It's very thought-provoking and really made me think a lot about how I view population demographics as a whole. You spoke a lot about fertility, and I wonder if you can touch on what fertility means. Does it mean fertility as in the womb space of both men and women and gender diverse people and their capacity to actually grow a child? Is that fertility changing, or is it the fertility of the environment, climate change, all of the factors including healthcare, is that decreasing the fertility rate? Because I think that's also something I'm kind of grappling with. Is it human fertility, biological fertility, or the fertility of the environment? Thank you.
Thanks for the question. I think when we use fertility, particularly in demography, we simply mean we talk about the total fertility rate, which is the average number of children a woman in a particular setting or geography or context would have in their lives, in their lifetime. But the way it is calculated is actually summing up to say, if you have a child today and that child survives to age 15 and lives through age 49, and at every age they have children at the rate at which women in those age groups are having children today, by the end of her reproductive years, how many children will she have? So you sum up for the number of children, what we call age-specific fertility rates, like for 15 to 19, 20 to 24, 25 to 29. So you're saying if this child survives to age 15 and they have children throughout their life at the rates women are having children today, how many children would they have? So it gives you a summary measure of the average number of children per woman in a country or in a city or in a setting.
So, as you were talking around population estimation, I was just wondering how natural disasters like pandemics or typhoons or cyclones that lead to massive death of people are accounted for in population estimation. and how such factors would affect the productivity of a population. This question came through to me because I was thinking in my village, if you have an overgrowth of a population of chicken, you don't eat them or you don't slaughter them for visitors, just know that very soon they will be stricken by an epidemic. And so they will all die. But usually there's only 1 or 2 chicken who still survive that episode. And they start again the process of reproduction. So just thinking in the human population how these factors play. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I think one of the things I keep telling people is that when you talk about population as numbers, it's really a no-brainer, because even if you're 10 billion or 5 billion, what are you going to do? Kill off the other ones. So it doesn't make sense. But we talk about the rate of growth of that population. That's really more important, because that's what determines and drives how much you're able to invest in that population and all of those. So to answer your question, it is interesting that actually epidemics and pandemics and all of those, like COVID-19 was a major disaster, but its demographic impact is negligible. And populations bounce back very quickly from those. So, because what happens, there are COVID babies. When people are stuck indoors, 9 months later, you have a peak. And in many countries, they are seeing a peak in childbearing due to COVID. So even the people died, but it's compensated by increased fertility in other settings and all that. So the net effect is pretty much negligible. It might affect the population in a particular geography that experienced that pandemic, but at the global level...
That's the microphone. Speak.
I've got the mic. I've got the mic. Sorry, I was getting the mic. Professor, there's a question from Stephen Peterson online, and he says, great talk, Alex. How do you see productivity as a factor in this and the required investment in Africa's youth now, at the same time as high fertility limits the ability to make that investment?
So can you repeat that?
I was running up the stairs. My step count can work. Okay. So Stephen Peterson says, great talk. How do you see the productivity as a factor in this? And the required investments in Africa's youth now, at the same time as high fertility limits the ability to make that investment?
Okay. That's an excellent question. And the answer to that is, first of all, when girls marry at 15 or start childbearing at 15, you've lost most of their non-reproductive contributions to society. And let me repeat that so that you understand what I'm saying. Think about it, the person we heard yesterday, Rose, dead at 17. Because she is pregnant. And we know that early onset of childbearing is one of the major risk factors for maternal mortality and all that. And so when girls start early, they miss the opportunity to be in school and to develop their full human potential and capacity and whatever they can contribute to that society. However, investments in education, like I gave the example of Niger, when you're doubling your population every 18 years, how do you double the number of schools and teachers and resources that you need to maintain this current level of 60-70% of girls not making it through past primary school? So even to maintain the current level is hard. And that's why I said that things will get harder in these settings. So, and that then affects the productivity because, the engagement of women in other productive activities. And don't get me wrong, I think for many of them they do work and extremely valuable work, but it's unpaid. And we don't factor that into our national GDP calculations and all of this because they're unpaid work. And because of that, we don't actually get the benefits of those. Households and families get that, but not the country as a whole. But if they go to school and they're able to have new opportunities in life, then you begin to see that productivity factor coming in. And you think about it, people keep thinking about the demographic dividend in Africa. We have a large youth, but you really don't achieve demographic dividend because you have a large number of young people. You only achieve it to the point that your dependency ratio begins to change. And how that changes is that you have fewer people being born in this society than the ones that are above them. And then you begin to have and it has to be a concentrated, short period of time where your working age population is much larger than your dependent population. In Africa, it's taking us 50, 60, 70 years. And so it's like a plateau. And we don't get that dividend. So let's not kid ourselves. That is something that we've talked about because donors are interested in it and all of that, but it is not happening. And we cannot achieve it without a change.
Thank you.
Alex, thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. I wonder if we can come closer to home. You kept on referring to Niger. And as you know, we had a coup there recently. But I want us to imagine that there's a new democratic government and that you asked to advise the president, the newly elected president, given the demographic trends that you've just highlighted, what would be the key things you would advise the president? Because it seems to me that there's a bit of a contradiction. On the one hand, you highlighted what happened in the Asian countries where there was there were determined policies around family planning with unintended consequences, especially for girl children, and the pattern that you've shown. And on the other hand, the kind of projected increase in Niger and your request for, or at least the indication around family planning programs. So clearly it's very complex and it's potentially contradictory, where you don't always change cultural norms. So what would be the key pieces of advice that you would give as the presidential advisor? Thank you.
Another question?
Yeah, thank you too for that presentation. My question is regarding to your concern about South Korea encouraging childbearing at home and then encouraging family planning in Niger. That's what you said. Do you really have a problem with that?
No,
because you also said
Sunday.
that with this high population growth, unless something happens, we are going to have very unstable countries. And I think we're already seeing that. It is not in the future. It is already now. So do you think, because if we just go on, if we really want to change the lives of the Africans, then the rate of economic growth must be more than double the rate of population growth. But that's not what is happening. Do you think that Africa needs to adopt the one-child policy like China and stabilize first before you?
Well, okay, I will take those two questions. Just to clarify on the last question, I have no problem with that. But the question I was raising is that becomes ethical questions, and there are people who are advocating that it is wrong, it's unethical to do this and then achieve and do something else at home. That your domestic policy and your international policy should be in sync. But I'm saying that actually the opposite of that this context matters, and in places where population is growing very fast, they need help to manage that. And in places where it's declining, they also need a different type of strategy. And those things can coexist in there. But we need to have that conversation. That's the point I'm making. And let's share on your question, really. The short answer is, for many countries in Africa today, when they want to see where they could be, they look to South Korea. That's why I actually used the country as an example, because in the when many of our countries got their independence in the early 60s, they were as rich as South Korea, as poor as South Korea. And so, even today, many countries would rather trade places with South Korea than where they are today. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. If you think about Ghana, let me say Ghana, for instance, and South Korea, where would you rather be? A GDP of $48,000, a GDP of 1,200. I mean, so the point there is, there are challenges on both ends. And the unfortunate thing is that demography does not have a mechanism of saying, okay, you need to have 2 children and you maintain that for a long period. I mean, these are individual behaviors that happen in bedrooms and everywhere else, and at the end of the day, but we know patterns over time begins to emerge. But we don't have control over that, and that's why questions are raised, even with the China one-child policy. Would fertility have been any different? Because you look at the other countries around it that didn't have that policy, and they still declined almost as fast or faster than China declined. So it is not about having a one-child policy and all that. It's about making sure that women who need services are able to get those services, that women have the opportunity to go to school, that their government is, if I am going to advise Niger, I would say, right from, there's a political leadership, as we've seen in many other countries, like in Malawi, like in Rwanda, like in Botswana and other places, where government has been very forthright in talking about services. And when you provide services, people use it. In Bangladesh, even when they go to rural areas and very poor farmers, and you make family planning available, they use it, and fertility comes down. So that's one part. But you cannot just say, it's all family planning. We need to invest in education. We need to invest in healthcare and child health immunization and all of those things. Because as long as child survival is not sustained, fertility, will not fall below a certain level. So those are the realities. We don't have a single answer that says this is it. But within this mix, I think there's a huge opportunity for different policies that can move us forward.
We're taking 3 more questions, Sunday, and then I'll follow by we already have, okay. Sunday, Alphonsus, and there's a gentleman who I can't see because of my glasses.
Thank you very much, Professor Alex, for the very interesting presentation. I'm aware of this particular project of the World Bank, Enhance, Empower, Educate, or this e-framework, wanting to build capacity, human capital development in Africa. So with the presentation that you have made that many countries, in terms of their population projection, the growth seems to be faster than projected by the UN and other agencies. So what is the chances, or what are the chances of African countries reaping demographic dividend? Because there are also the argument about the fact that the window of opportunity has already reaped the dividend or enhanced the dividend. So I really wanted to speak a little more about the opportunity of African countries, considering the fact that the population seems to be growing faster than projected. So has the window of opportunity closed already, or are there still chances for African countries to be able to reap the demographic dividend? Thank you.
The second comment would be around the carrying capacity for most of our environments and stuff. I think many years ago we all understood from the famous economists that as we grow, we run short of food and then we die of starvation and stuff. But today we know innovation has actually increased the same capacity to produce food until we're actually dying of obesity. So in this context, do you think of any innovations that may come on board and maybe address the aging population in the West? So for instance, we know sometimes once in a while, maybe a woman can deliver maybe 10 babies at once. I mean, could we harness on that for the Western population? Or could there be other innovations as a whole that you think may come on board to help the West deal with the problem?
And lastly, one question from the online. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Professor Alex, for such a wonderful presentation. My name is Janine Wimana-Nicole. It's such a privilege again to see you again after such a long time. So a quick question here, as on a very complex topic. And I think other speakers have spoken, asked some of the questions, but what I wanted to hear from you, what would be an advice would be given to researchers, especially on the African continent, knowing that the African continent cannot use one blanket in terms of demographic or population health. There are contextual issues that need to be taken into consideration, and here I'm speaking, for example, the case of Rwanda. Coming from the genocide, issues of population or birth control is something that is very sensitive. But what I wanted to hear from you, what are the evidence-based practices or models do we have in Africa that has worked? And then when do you decide, or if we have any formula, when you put in place a policy, for example, for one child, then at which point do you have to change such a policy so that you avoid a negative effect that might follow, as we experience in other countries you've just spoken? Thank you.
Thank you all for the questions. Sunday, in answering about the question about the demographic dividend and the window of opportunity, and for Africa, I would say that the window has not even opened. Because we still have a pyramid, and with a population pyramid in many African countries, you don't have, what drives dividend is a change in the age structure. So your age structure has not changed. So that window has not opened. But when the window opens, where there is a shift and the fertility has fallen at a level that then ensures that the base is smaller than the other part. And then over time, that begins to ensure that the labor force that you have would have fewer dependents. And that's when that window begins to open. So for me, I would say that for many African countries, that window has not opened. And if we continue the way we are going, it will not open soon. Okay. In terms of, how do you maintain this? But I think I answered that question before to say that we don't really have a formula, because to say that, you have, in a country, people, I think that's the remarkable thing about patterns, that, people have children for many different reasons. In many urban cities in Africa, 40% of the births are not planned. And yet, fertility rates remain constant, similar from year to year, despite the fact that people are having children for many different reasons. So how do you then ensure that when fertility begins to drop and to fall, it's falling and creating new opportunities? And that's what you see in South Korea, particularly because of the inability for women to combine work and family life. They decide to work and not have the children. And it's almost like a strike against having children, because the society has not made it viable option for them. And so those are challenges and real. And the question is, how do you deal with them? It takes policy options that people have to look at and tailor to their own context and see what happens within those. And the question, the last question is really about, yeah, that's the last one, but the third. Yeah. I think the question is, about the fact that there is, people have, that we will die of starvation, and yet we have obesity and all. I'll answer your question. And the point I'm making is that every prediction about doom and gloom with population growth has been proven not to matter. We have the ingenuity to really improve lives in many ways, but we also have real challenges to those. So what I would say is, what drives climate change more than the numbers is really our consumption patterns. And The concern is that as Africa gets richer, and then we move away from our traditional foods to meat and all of those, and then we will contribute, like other rich countries are contributing and emerging economies, to those. Our carbon footprint is still very low. So that's the major challenge we have when we think about climate change and population, is that it's not a one-to-one ratio. Yeah, population is a factor, but it depends. If you take an American, a Chinese, an Indian, and an African, the implications of having a birth here and there is different completely for climate. So we cannot make a very generic assessments of the relationship there. It depends on where people are, and our consumption patterns play a much a higher impact on what happens than simply the numbers. And the last question, I think the point here is for us as researchers, we should not take everything we read as the gospel truth. Particularly when it comes to Africa, we need to be able to look at our own lived experiences and realities. And I said that the solution for Africa is sitting with us here on the continent. And we have to recognize that. We have that knowledge, we have that experience. When I'm looking at these things and thinking about Jamaica and the UK, similar fertility levels, but completely different trajectories. Because Jamaica has the country with the largest immigrant population in the US is Jamaica. You also go to the UK, it's maybe one of the countries with the largest immigrant population in the UK. So all the people are living. You look at Puerto Rico, it's similar things. And the way they will age is completely a consequence of migration. And that changes the structure of the population in very significant ways. So the point there, again, I'm saying, is that we need to be able to recognize where we are, and then question, like thinking about that the models that we have now is not working for many of our countries. Our demographic experiences and future is very different from the European model. But we need to be able to create a theory that will help us make that connection and then create a new way of thinking about demographic issues on the continent. So we have a responsibility as researchers to make sure that we don't discount the knowledge we have of the context and of the issues that we are working on.
Thank you very much.
In a good way. Thank you so much for your talk. I think it was such fascinating discussions, and I saw there were so many questions that we were unable to answer today. Sorry, colleagues, that we're not able to deal with all your questions. I'm sure you'll have a chance to chat to Prof. Alex during the break or during the lunch. Please take advantage of that. Our next session, at session 1, we're kicking off, you're off to a good start. It looks at the impact of CARTA, and we are going to get some reflections from some of the fellows. For this session, we're moderating by Judith Mwanza. Thanks, Judith.
Good morning, everyone. I welcome you all to this session, a very important session, the hallmark of this conference, I would call it that. I have with me 4 CARTA Fellows graduates that will be discussing their journeys. So before we do that, all protocols observed. I'm learning this.
Thank you.
Yes. And then I will just give an overview of what CARTA is for those that may not know. So the Consortium for Advanced Research Training in Africa, that's CARTA, was formed in 2008 to support the development of a vibrant African academy that leads world-class multidisciplinary research with positive impact on public health and population health. Till date, there are 10 cohorts, as we've heard, comprising 243 fellows, 145 graduates, and 594 trained faculty and staff. The fellows together have over 3,300 peer-reviewed articles and publications. I think we deserve a clap for that. Key to the training program of CARTA Fellows is a series of 4 joint advanced seminars, which we call JAZZ. Okay. These are designed to enhance the skills and knowledge to guide and propel them through the research process and provide a foundation for building networks and researchers, peers, and mentors. The JAS requirement promises to produce strong common quality expertise that can help the long-term disciplinary cohesion of scholars who come from different universities with varied quality in previous education. The program offers varying training modalities that make learning flexible while encouraging self-directed training. The program offers residential training components with the advantage of getting the fellows to focus fully on specific program tasks and to learn collaboratively, interact with local and international facilitators, and develop and consolidate professional networks. The JAS courses are offered sequentially for 4 years to each cohort, and they build skills and conceptual depth from year to year. So for this session, we received a lot of abstracts for people to come and share their experiences. And if you're not sitting in the front, it doesn't mean that your submission was not good enough. We appreciate every submission that came through, and believe it or not, we read everything and we have compiled, and everything will be shared. So for this session, the people that are sitting in front, the selection was based on the relevance to the CARTA Fellowship, which I'm not saying that the others didn't have, they did. The relevance to the conference theme, and the conference theme, just to remind ourselves, it's to bridge research, build bridges, strengthen research capacity for sustainable development in Africa. Okay. So at this point, I will just ask the 4 people that I have with me. I'll call them by their first names, but they'll introduce themselves. And when you do introduce yourselves, so there's John, there's Karini, there's Margaret, there's John, and there's Kirsty. But when you introduce yourselves, colleagues, please tell us your full name, the institution where you're based currently, and it's of interest for you to tell us which institution you were at in case it's changed at the beginning of your CARTA journey. Thank you. So I'll just sit here so that we can actually interact. Nice. So before we start, we can just introduce ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Karani Maguta. I come from Moi University in Eldoret, Kenya. I was in Moi when I started CARTA. I haven't moved.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. And I'm at the University of the Witwatersrand, but I'm also working at the National Institute for Communicable Diseases as a medical epidemiologist. I'm a cohort 7 CARTA fellow. So we'll continue from where we left off, please.
I'll take it again. My name is Karani Maguta. I work for Moi University, Eldoret, Kenya. I joined CARTA program in 2014 as cohort 4. I graduated in 2018. Thank you.
Okay. My name is Abimbola Margaret Obimakinde. I'm a CARTA cohort 9 fellow. I joined in 2019. So this is my 4th year I'm registered at Wits University, the Department of Family Medicine, but I work primarily in the College of Medicine, University of Ibadan. I'm a senior lecturer and a family physician. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Ayodele John Alunge. I joined CARTA in 2014 on cohort 4. I completed my PhD at the University of Nairobi, Kenya in 2017. Primarily, I'm a lecturer at the University of Ibadan in Nigeria. Thank you.
Good morning, colleagues. My name is Kirsty van Stombroek. I'm in cohort 9 as well, that started in 2019. I'm an occupational therapist and work in the occupational therapy department here at the University of the Witwatersrand.
Thank you, colleagues. I think we'll get started. So looking at what you had submitted, and I'll start with you, Karini. You mentioned the theory of change and the CARTA journey with regards to this. Could you please elaborate on that? And as you do that, maybe you can just put everyone in light of what was in the abstract.
All right. What was in my abstract? I tried to argue that my training, being a basic scientist, and probably that's where I should begin, I am trained at a postgraduate level as a basic scientist. When most of my colleagues were going for the clinical postgraduate courses, I chose to do medical physiology. But I also did epidemiology. And just like someone asked yesterday, I remember somebody asking the issue of, leaving the laboratory some 30 years ago, having been a cardiovascular physiologist, and which is mainly what I do, and I really identified. I felt that I didn't quite fit in public health debates or conversations on public health, being a basic scientist. And the temptation to really move away was very high, because everyone thinks, or at least then would tell me, that to fit in real public health debates that advise policies, that help shape health issues, you have to really work from your epidemiology, and I think which drove me to doing epidemiology. But joining CARTA for my PhD, I learned that, hey, I could actually contribute in public health debates by coming from a basic sciences point of view, where I marry what happens in the mechanisms that we study in the labs, in trying to argue that they have an aspect and a role they play in advising the large scope of public health. And this was basically shaped by the critical thinking aspects that I would pick from the JASs that we went through. And this actually came in around JAS 1 and JAS 2 that were very close together. And I had huge problems fitting in. And I know one of the main areas where we had the real problems was coming up with a gap that the public health aspect would come help meet or address. And I was at a point where I felt, no, I do not fit. But thanks to the justice, thanks to that critical thinking approach that we were given, I was able to somehow fit in. Despite of my basic sciences background, I now feel I am able to fit around that round table that discusses public health issues. Thank you.
Thank you. So are you working in public health now, or you're in basic sciences?
I think I'm working in both, because I now do not think that there's a real divide between public health and basic sciences, and which is what I think we're trying to help bridge now, and so that we're not left out of any conversation or out of that table. So I think I work in both. I think the work I'm doing, though mainly from a physiology perspective, which is what I mainly teach at the university, has so much, and we probably can discuss later as we continue, that has to do with public health.
So just before we leave you, in your abstract, you also spoke of community running something distantly, long distance. That has to do with public health? Can you just elaborate on that?
That is one of them. Eldoret, Kenya is where most of the renowned world-class athletes from Kenya come from. So we have that advantage of our university being found there. But the same Eldoret, Kenya has recorded most of huge proportions of the population being very sedentary. And one would wonder, how come a very athletic town has individuals who are very inactive, very sedentary? And a couple of studies have been done and published, and it has been found that very many of our kids are sedentary. Very many of our kids have measurements that show very high cardiovascular diseases risk. Prehypertension or elevated blood pressure, obesity, name them. And the question becomes, how come yet this is where all the lean people we watch on TV come from? And it cost us wondering how we could work with what we are renowned for, being very athletic, and we do screening for athletes so that individuals can bring their kids. You're able to do some physiological measurements. You're able to see how are their lung volumes, how is the pulse rate, the resting pulse rate or heart rate, some basic measurements that can advise the potential of somebody being a good athlete. And we thought, by bringing in such, where we have campaigns where we ask for people to volunteer for screening and all such, we are able to identify individuals who are at risk for, say, cardiovascular disease. And so, well, the attraction here is every parent brings their parent because you want to see if your kid can run. Every parent brings their kid. You want to see, can they run? As they come for this screening, and you probably hope that one day you can watch them on TV, so everybody wants to come. You are able to pick individuals who, yeah, they may not run, yes, they are healthy, but there's some risk that you're able to pick, probably the waist circumference, maybe their heart rate, maybe their blood pressure. You can refer them now to a clinician, and you are now able to link to a public health approach from a screening that was basically meant for just athletes. So there is a lot of connection here.
Thank you. I'll move on to Margaret. Margaret, being a female African, what do you have to say about your CARTA journey?
Okay, so for me, I'll try and keep it short and simple. Is it okay like this? Okay. So, to start with, for me, I was primarily in the clinical-based specialty in my institution. That's family medicine. So then I became a specialist in my early 30s, and there was no opportunity for academic progression in the specialty until like 6 years later. So then I came back into academics. And then I needed to study further. Then I enrolled myself for a master's. Then when I was done, I was desirous of having a PhD. I paid out of pocket for the master's. And then I was looking for opportunity to get a PhD, and then I learned about CARTA. So I applied the first time. I think I failed one of the exams. It was 4 stages, I think, or 4 different types of tests. Then I didn't give up, then I applied the second time. So by the time I got CARTA PhD scholarship, I was already above 40. But thankfully, CARTA is always considerate of the fact that being a female comes with a challenge that you needed to do some family things, have children, and then maybe then you come back into academics, so you decide to study further. So the age cutoff for females is 45. So at the time I got CARTA, I was already above 40. I think I was just 40 and some months. And then for males, it's 40. So that was a huge benefit that I got from CARTA, because at that point, all the scholarship that I applied for had age cutoff of 35. So CARTA had age cutoff of 45 for females. So
All right. Thank you. Just to follow up on that, you mentioned steps that are involved in the application process. Can you just give a summary of that, just in half
Okay, so I think you write a proposal and to explain why you should be considered, like a motivational essay. Then they go through that and then tell you you need to write, I can't remember, but 4 different or 5.
No stress. We'll come to, the others are also fellows, so they'll...
Okay, so, and then you get the feedback after 3 months, and then they tell you how you've done in those exercises. I think there's something about plagiarism, critical thinking, statistics and...
No, it's fine. We'll go over that. So we'll move on to John. Tell us your journey. How has it been to be a CARTA Fellow?
Okay, thank you very much. This is a privilege for me to give thanks to CARTA for the opportunity given to me to be what I am today. My journey started from attending FAS, Faculty Administrative Workshop, in 2013. I've never heard about CARTA. I was selected from my university. Then I was working in the library as a librarian. So I came to Kenya for that program, and I heard about CARTA and beautiful things that can happen. And I have desire to do PhD. Then I applied. But the concern is that my background in library science, how is it connecting with public health? But when I read more about CARTA, CARTA is very multidisciplinary, and they accommodate everybody. If you can do something on population or public health. And I applied, I just changed the direction of my work. From new media, social media, I go into issue of HIV and AIDS among young people. And I applied. And first time I got the fellowship. But it didn't come, it came with challenge. Because getting there, it was a lot of meeting people from diverse backgrounds. Many of them, they are medical doctors, sciences, me from library science. How can I cope here? But the JASs are very, very wonderful. Starting from the first one, JAS 1, in Nairobi, whereby we were given time, like open mind, to think critically and to move on with your project, with your topics. So it gave me a kind of stand to build my area of interest from my area in communication, library science and information, linking with public health. And today, looking back, I give thanks to CARTA and all the facilitators for building and planting in me the mind to go into research in public health. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, John. Kirsty, can we hear from you? How has your journey been?
Yes, thank you. So I think one thing that has stood out about my CARTA journey is that CARTA's values have overlapped with my own values in many ways. So firstly, why values important? And I think values shape the culture of an organization. And I think Dr. Catherine said yesterday that a sick culture leads to broken academics. And so the values are important to shape the culture to produce vibrant academics. So firstly, my experience was that CARTA interrogates values. Is it, are we valuing title and position and status and prestige, or are we valuing impact? And I think we've heard it over and over again that CARTA really values impact. I come from the disability and rehabilitation world. So for me, impact is that the measure of our wealth and contribution is change affected towards the development that honors the dignity, rights, and worth of all African citizens, and every effort to inch towards societies that affirm this, and that research is a means to social and environmental good. And then secondly, I believe that CARTA is person-centered. They don't produce research machines. They produce, or they're working with people who need to breastfeed their children and deal with loss and trauma in their family. And they respond to that. It's not always easy to respond to that, but they do. I think, thirdly, that you've heard that they're multidisciplinary. And then another aspect that's very intrinsic to CARTA is that context matters, and they are about creating enabling environments. And we can't build an academy without attending to the environment in which our researchers and leaders operate. And I think when environments are enabling, it's often difficult to see those enabling forces. And we can put it down to the caliber of the individuals. But CARTA really invests in creating supportive academic environments. And then lastly, CARTA welcomes creativity. My abstract was very left field, but they're okay with that. And yeah, I think welcoming contributions from the arts and the sciences towards a synergy towards achieving public health and global development goals.
Thank you. And now that we've had a round, and perhaps we can just add on, we were hit by the COVID pandemic. Is there anything that you would want to share in terms of any assistance that you got from CARTA during COVID towards the achievement of your goals? Perhaps, yes, John.
Okay, yeah. Before COVID-19, I won re-entry grants. Let me inform you also, CARTA will not leave you even after PhD. They still keep following us. So I want re-entry grants to build on looking Nollywood movies, on HIV and AIDS communication among young people. I started, and the part of the re-entry grant is for me to travel to the US to meet my collaborator. But I couldn't go. CARTA wrote me that, the money is there. What can you do during this COVID-19? Thank God for CARTA, they gave us a lot of mind to think and be very proactive. I thought, what can I do? I quickly thought about a project called, the project is on chronicles of researchers in COVID-19. Yeah, at least I want to see what researchers are doing during COVID-19, telling stories on YouTube. So, and CARTA was able to support that. With the money, the grant that I should have used to do something in the US, I was able to do it within the country. And it made opportunity for us to even get people to speak across the world, including Professor Sharon. She couldn't come into Nigeria, but we were able to be one of the keynote speakers. So CARTA was able to support me and to make me to think beyond the box and do something good. Thank you.
Thank you. That shows some flexibility with the program. So if something is not working in this direction, CARTA is flexible enough to bend the other way. That's good. Anything from the other panelists?
Like John, I also got a re-entry grant, and this was during the COVID-19 times, 2020, 2021. And we looked at how COVID affected people's behaviors in terms of being physically active, working out, getting out of their houses, and their usual behaviors on physical activity. So thanks to CARTA, again, as John put it, we were able to still work through COVID-19 moments, and we have outputs towards the same.
All right, thank you. Anything from you, Margaret? Okay, so perhaps I can just add on that there were, apart from the re-entry grants, during COVID, CARTA also had the facility, or it did open up to the fellows, whoever needed assistance with childcare or elderly parents, everything that would have been hit, as a result of the COVID pandemic, that was open to fellows to apply for the grants to be assisted. At this point, I think I can open up to the audience. If anyone has a question, you will see that we're actually selling CARTA here. And believe it or not, we have not said everything. There's plenty more. We're just being told, your time is up, but we're trying.
I'm not the bad guy, but I do want to keep us to time. Colleagues, can we have 2 questions or comments from the audience only? So, only 2. Is there anybody that wants to? We've got one at the top.
Thank you. GDI in Court 9. As a CARTA fellow, my mileage in publication increased greatly. And it was because of CARTA. I thought we could only publish a number of publications, and I got a mail that you can publish as many as you need from your work. So I am eternally grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you not going to allow us one more?
Because it's been so short, we can have one more. I think that's happened.
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm going to put you on the spot. And I think you've said that CARTA graduates are supposed to be change agents. So whoever wants to bite the bullet for the group, what change have you engineered, if any? in your institution?
Personally, through CARTA, I have been able to start for postgraduates, those journal clubs. That's something that was not existent in at least my school. We are able to now meet with postgraduates, go through publications, go through discussions that advise the programs they are taking, and that has been one of a couple of other things I have been able to change in my institution.
Although I'm not yet a graduate, but I've learned a lot from CARTA, especially the teachings on style of teaching, presentation, which I've been able to share with my undergraduate medical students and the postgraduate as well. And then particularly the style of writing that we were put through between JAS 1 and 2. It's been quite impactful, and like my colleague in Quad 9 said, apart from myself being able to publish good papers and with the support of CARTA, paying for them in High Impact Journal, I've been able to teach my residents and master students the style of writing that I've been taught through the JASs. So that's been quite helpful.
Mine is on the issue of the paper writing. I remember when I was getting promotion from a level to another level. So at the promotional meeting, they asked me, who is this guy? That his H-index is far more than where he's going. So please, all professors that are moving, go and meet him to guide you how they can increase their H-index. I was embarrassed, but I'm happy because CARTA made it possible for me. Oh, this guy is going to lecture out one, and his H-index is like a professor. So that is one. Secondly, on the issue of travels, you know, through CARTA, I traveled a lot across Africa, outside Africa. So even in my school, for you to get promotion, international travels is important. There was a time one professor said, reduce your travels because it's too much for your level. That whenever they want to do conference, oh, guide me. Where can I go for conference, international conference? I was able to guide them. The last one, on the issue of grant writing, many of them invite me to be part of their team because they know that I will bring valuable ideas based on what I got in CARTA. And we got a lot of grants, you know, through that. The last one is on the issue of, grants. Okay, I think I'm done for now.
Thank you. So I think in our department, CARTA has contributed hugely to our capacity to supervise masters and now PhD projects. But personally, I think one place where I was able to share the investment that has been invested in me is with our professional organization of hand therapists in South Africa. Along with a colleague from the University of Stellenbosch, we were able to run 2 online workshops to assist clinicians working in the field to develop and share practice-based evidence that they are generating. So that's one way that I've been able to be part of change.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you very much to the panelists for sharing your journeys through the CARTA program. We hope we can have more people come through and apply. Yes, we have 10 cohorts and still counting, right? We're still counting, we're getting more. And I guess that brings us to the end of this session. I would like to acknowledge Marcelina, who was greatly involved in this process, the preparation for this process. She was going to chair this session, but I stood in for her. Thank you all for coming, and thank you for this session.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. All protocols observed. Again, I have a challenge in that, but it's all right. At this point, we want to do the curriculum launch. We have had a very good run with CARTA from 2011 when the first cohort was called in, but before that there was work that was going underground. Is it underground? Really, it wasn't underground as such, but there was a lot of work going on, And after that, there was commencement of a lot of work that went in with the court coming in. And then we got to understand what CARTA is all about. Now, CARTA aims to become to categorize African institutions to become centers of excellence in terms of research, and at the same time create critical mass for change, research leaders who would be able to change Africa in terms of that. To do that, they did quite a lot of work in thinking around what can be done to bridge the gap that was already there in production of research leaders. And with that, they came up with a number of interventions. These interventions were the ones that you've heard the panelists talk about, the JASs, that's the Joint Advanced Seminars, and others that were done in the process of that. Now, on and before the 2011, as I had said, a number of well-renowned actors in CARTA or partners came up together with these interventions, and at this point, after 11 years with the rest of African universities, and to guide us through that, to understand the whole approach, I will request Dr. Flora Karemi to come and give us that essence, as it were, moving forward. Thank you very much. Flora Karemi is one of the managers in CARTA. She has long experience in matters higher education and quality assurance. And I won't say more, I can say more. I won't say more. Thank you very much. Welcome, Flora.
Thank you, Dr. Kavins Kidenji. All protocols observed. I think that's what I've been taught. All protocols observed. Good morning. So I just want to take us through maybe something brief before we are able to understand the curriculum of CARTA more. And I'll start off by just referring to the fact that CARTA actually has a multi-pronged approach to both PhD training and also to institutional capacity strengthening. And so we start our journey with the PhD training. And like what happens in many of our African universities, we have fellowships given for PhD training, then you have the stipend given, and all that is required to support the PhD training. Well, for CARTA, we take it a mile further to focus on how do we support this fellow. You had Dr. Alonge talking of the fact that when he got into the program at first, he kept on wondering, what support do I have? So CARTA gives that support to the fellows through, first of all, introducing them to what we refer to as a joint advanced seminars, where, and many people will refer to it as JASs, where the fellows work together in a cohort and strengthen each other's critical thinking. And you'll hear more about that. But beyond the support that we give to the fellows in terms of the joint advanced seminars that help them in their journeys, we also support them with academic writing support. And so they go through a period of 1 to 2 years where they're supported to improve their capacity in terms of academic writing. When the fellow has finished or graduated from the PhD program, we don't leave the fellows there. And I think Dr. Karani referred to that. We work with them in terms of seeing how we can push them towards becoming research leaders. Yesterday when Catherine was talking, she referred to the fact that our aim is not just to create the PhD graduate, but to lead them towards becoming research leaders. So we have the fellowships that were mentioned in terms of the postdoc opportunities, the re-entry grants, and also the postdoc fellowships in different institutions. But beyond that, because we want them to be grounded in research, we want them to be grounded in what they need to be as a leader, we also have what we refer to as our graduate grant writing workshop, whereby the fellows are taken through an understanding of how they can be able to produce award-winning kind of grants. That has to do with the fellow. But we are aware of that the fellow needs support, not just from the academic end, but also from the institution. So we are aware of that. The fellows have supervisors. And many of our supervisors grow into that supervisory role just by virtue of them being a lecturer. But we as CARTA support the fellows by ensuring that we strengthen the capacities of their supervisors to supervise them in a better manner. So the quality of our supervisors are also quite high. Beyond that, we are also aware of that the institution has support systems which the fellows walk into. And support systems all the way from the finance department. You had Alonga refer to the FAS, and he said that he was a librarian before. That's support that is required for our different fellows. So we bring together our different functionary areas, those areas that would support the fellows. The registrar, the finance officers, the grant management office, the research management office, the academic offices, and the librarians, so that then they can have an understanding of what they need to do to work together towards supporting the fellows in a synergetic manner. In the last few years, we have made a lot of focus on how we can ensure that our institutions are strong enough, not just to support our fellows, but also to support other PhD fellows within their institutions. And I like the question that Catherine asked. One of our theory of change aspects is that we expect our fellows to become change agents within the institutions. And so as we continued thinking of how we can help our fellows and the facilitators in the different institutions become change agents within their institutions, and also to be able to facilitate the different interventions that we have as CARTA, we came up with a training of trainer program.
I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about the process of developing these curricula. As you heard, there are 4 separate curricula, and then there's a training of trainers curricula for each of the curricula. So this was a collective process by an international faculty. It started at our very first meeting when we conceptualized CARTA, and it was done with a very clear aim in mind, very clear idea about the kind of graduates that we wanted, why we were doing the faculty and administrative staff training. It was all about thinking about the content and the method of trying to get people to think critically, apply what they were learning, and change the way they behaved, the way their institutions behaved, and hopefully have a positive impact on society in general. There were multiple curriculum development meetings all across the world, actually. Well, no, we never went to the US, but in many places. There was rigorous evaluation of the curriculum. In the beginning, I think our fellows might have been quite tired of the session-by-session evaluation they were asked to do. Every single one of our sessions, whether it was supervisor training, whether it was the faculty and administrative staff training to build institutional development, all of that was critiqued by the faculty and also by the participants. And one of the things that has happened through CARTA is we've seen generational change. And so people who are graduates of this program are actually now facilitators. And that means that our curriculum has grown and changed over time. We believe that we have now, because of the impact of CARTA, a proof of concept that this curriculum is of some value. We're very clear that it's already been implemented in a number of places, and we're also very clear that it is not a cut and paste. This is not like, this is how you do it. This is, one of the examples of how you might want to do it. And it's a stimulation to people to look and adapt rather than cut and paste. We're very, very clear about that. The other thing that I think we want to emphasize about the curriculum is that it is a complement to existing PhD training. There are two things that PhD students need: in-depth, discipline-specific training. But in addition to that, a number of transferable skills. And we believe that for the PhD training, it's actually relevant to an enormous range of disciplines. And for the others, it's about institution building, and we believe that it's relevant to all institutions. But the curriculum training process, development process was challenging. There were a lot of loud voices. In fact, the people who made some of these videos, the one video that you saw, came up to me and he said to me, "Something's bad's happening in that room." I said, what's going on? He said, "They're shouting." And I put my head in, and it was a group of people arguing with passion about why their approach was better than a different approach, and then the counter argument. I said, "No, that's not good. That's not bad what's going on in there. That's good what's going on in there." And I can tell you there are times, Akin, where I remember us arguing about what should or shouldn't be in the curriculum. And two of the people who are parts of the many people who are part of the curriculum are sitting here, Professor Migdebon and Professor Katahori from University of Ibadan and the University of Makerere. I could have chosen, we could have asked anybody, but I asked them to think back and share with us a reflection, some anecdote, I don't know what you're going to say, about the curriculum training process, development process. Over to you.
So I'll start off, and Sharon has committed so many crimes over the years. So I think some of us are proud to be partners of the crimes she committed in CARTA. The CARTA program started slowly, let me say. The first curriculum development meetings took place in 2010, so that's like 13 years ago. And it's like the curriculum has been under development ever since. I don't remember any year that curriculum was not tweaked with. And sometimes they were very sharp turns. Let me focus on the main jazz curriculum, the jazz curricula first. And particularly Jazz 3. I think Jazz 1, Jazz 2, they were co-developed around the same time, mainly in Nairobi. But Jazz 3, we started the development in Nairobi, and then we moved to Gothenburg. And then I think the final meeting before we held the first Jazz 3 was at Warwick. And what struck me the most was the line of thought, the direction things were going when we concluded the meeting in Gothenburg. When we got to Warwick, things just changed completely. And one of the most significant changes that came about, I can't remember who brought the idea, but that was the scientific blitz. And suddenly that changed the complexion of the entire curriculum. Because so many things that we had fixed in one slot or another before, we had to rethink. And so that meeting was, it was tough. Many times we were on our desks well into the night, but I think at the end of the day, the product was really very good. And I think over the years, the evaluations, the blitzes were one of the high points that most of the fellows pointed to. Let me stop there.
Thanks, Akin. For those of you who want to know what a scientific blitz is, the web link is there, and it's one of the ones that are also demonstrated on the CARTA resources tab under the curriculum, and it's a method of getting people to think critically in a really fun way. And I encourage you to go and click on the few links to get more insight into what that's about. Thanks, Akin. Anne?
Thank you. As I reflected on the curriculum development process, I realized that I joined the team much later. Not much later, but at the iteration of the first, as they were reviewing the first JAS 1 curriculum. So the group I was working with knew each other very well, and they didn't seem to, to some extent, I think, as coming on board as a behavioral social scientist, there were several. Alex was there, but I think he sounded more as the leader, but also as public health. But I must say that for me it was a learning curve, the collaboration, the discussions, the iteration process, like Akin has talked about, it has been revised almost every year, tweaked, new ideas, new articles. I remember when we were developing the scientific blitz, the whole discussion about what are the current articles on which the fellows would be discussing. It was very enriching for me, a very collaborative process. I think a good way to shift your thinking. We come from universities which are disciplinary based, and curriculum development processes are disciplinary based in many ways, and they're reviewed maybe every 3 years. But this was an opportunity to think differently every year, to learn. As a lifelong learner, I think there was a lot to learn. And we didn't just get feedback from those collaborations and those discussions, but we took on board all the feedback that we're getting from the fellows. So every year, as we facilitated the different JASs, there would be a difference. We kept changing, and I was reflecting that for the last two cohorts, cohort 9 and I think cohort 10, because of COVID, there was another shift. We shifted into blended learning. We had to learn the backward design, how to design a curriculum for online teaching, and we all went through that learning process. But true to CARTA, now we've also trained the cohort 9 and cohort 10 how to do the backward curriculum design, which I think is a good thing. And I think what we have here is a very enriched curriculum, which has gone through a lot of iterations, but also very good, I think, for PhD training. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. I hope given you a taste of the creativity and the fun and the fighting that constituted developing all these different curricula, and the need for continual reevaluation and review. And we are sharing these all with everybody. Possibly one of the interesting things is that what possibly pushed us kicking and screaming into the online method was also the writing support. You heard the fellows talking about the writing support. We have a full online writing support method developed by ASEO, a Chilean organization whose purpose is to get voices of the South into the academic literature. None of our fellows today said it, but they will tell you that they learned the most painful and the most important lessons through doing the online work with the CARTA curricula. So on the CARTA curriculum site are materials for teachers. It's not like you can turn it on and then suddenly people learn. But there is also this particular curriculum for writers, whether you're whether you're an academic already or whether you're learning to be an academic. And this is something that can be done as a student. You can do it as an individual. It's a lot more creative if you do it in groups. And for the Wits staff who are here, you could use the Pomodoro sessions and use that as your guidelines about how to go about becoming a more comfortable, more confident academic writer, although I'm close to retirement and I find academic writing hard work. So the question is, how do you use our curriculum? As I said, it's on the website, and we're going to show you now how you can use the curriculum, and we're also going to post on the Zoom link the link to the curriculum for those of you who are online listening to us.
Amazing curriculum. Really, I think congratulations to the entire CARTA team for an amazing, amazing curriculum. Prof. Sharon, I was listening to the presentations, and it's really an amazing program that you've been putting people through. Well done. Colleagues, we're coming to tea. We're going to cut the tea a little bit short so that we can keep our time. It is Friday afternoon. So our tea is going to be from 11:20 until 11:40. It's going to be happening outside, just outside the auditorium. And I'm going to ask you to be back by 11:40 very promptly. There's one little announcement. Please listen up. The institutional posters that should be submitted to John Alongwe need to be submitted. And he's written this in caps, now. Now. So please submit your posters now for him. He's waiting for you so that we can so that can follow up on that program. But guys, please go to tea, enjoy the tea, have a
And thank you very much for all the people who have contributed towards this. I will request all the people who are in the groups of the reviews, the peer reviewers who are in this building, please stand up where you are. Please stand up where you are. There are quite a number. Just stand up. Kato, what are you doing seated? Quite a number. Please stand up where you are. Susan, yes, Prof. Yoran, thank you very much for the time you spent doing this. And we want to tell you this, that this curriculum, we will give it a window of feedback that you give to us. When you go to cartaafrica.org, you'll get to the teaching resources, and under teaching resources, you'll find all this curriculum there. Then when you are there, below the videos, there is an email link. It's somewhere there. Please click that email, send us feedback of any type. We are going to collect all that feedback and use it to make a final review and edit of all this curriculum, and we're going to be able to share with the rest of the world. That period will be maybe a month or so, not more than that. So please give us the feedback. Use it and let's impact Africa and the research ecosystem in Africa as it were. Please keep standing. Keep standing. Please keep standing. And at this point, we would want to make an appreciation of everyone and the funders who are here present. Please stand. Representative of SINDA, NORAD, FSA, please stand up. We want to make this acknowledgement together. We craft together and we celebrate the launch of CARTA curriculum as it were. Hello. Thank you very much. Feel appreciated. We thank you and invite you to be part of this process as we impact the research ecosystem in Africa. Thank you very much.
Or the coffee was cold, maybe, I'm not sure. Welcome back. We're going to get going so that we can try to keep as much time as possible. Just before we get going, there's going to be one little administrative announcement. There are parallel oral presentations that are happening at the moment. If you were supposed to be in one of those sessions, they are happening. They've started already. They are happening in lecture room 1 and 2, lecture room 5, and the computer lab. So please, if you do need to go there, make your way there. But we don't mind if you want to stay. Okay, we're ready to go. Colleagues, next session we have Securing the Future of Early Career Scholars. Moderating is Dr. Blessing Kaunda. And basically we're going to learn about the CARTA postdoctoral fellowship program and how it provides support to early career scholars. I'm very interested in this session because I'm an early career scholar.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Good morning once again. All the vice chancellors and the focal persons represented here, representatives from our northern partners, the APHRC and CARTA Secretariat, other key stakeholders, all protocols observed, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen. My name is Blessings Kaunda Kangama. I'm a medical anthropologist. I'm also an honorary researcher at the University of Witwatersrand and research consultant, as well as an honorary lecturer at Kamuzu University of Health Sciences in Malawi. I'm moderating this session on securing the future of early career researchers. Briefly, I will give you a survey presentation, and then we'll go in and talk to the beneficiaries and our Ds who are seated just in front of you to give you their lived experiences within the different programs that they've been involved in throughout the postdoctoral programs. Thank you. So in absentia, I would like to introduce Alex Kagaha. Dr. Alexander Kagaha is a CARTA graduate and a postdoctoral research fellow at the School of Public Health and Community Medicine in Gothenburg University. He is also an honorary researcher fellow at the University of the Witwatersrand. His research focuses on reimagining global health futures for marginalized populations in Africa. He is much anchored in critical social inquiry, and Alex is passionate about qualitative inquiries, discourse analysis, ethnographies, with specific attention to lack and conditions of lack of performativity of things, boundaries of consciousness, unconsciousness, and non-human elements. He was supposed to be here with us this morning to present this work on the survey in relation to the strengthening of postdoctoral training in Africa, experiences and lessons from the CARTA postdoctoral program. So we have been hearing a lot in terms of Africa having a weak capacity for postdoctoral research training. There is continuity in terms of brain drain, poor retention capacity for postdoctoral scholars. And however, if we are to consider having a critical mass of early career researchers, this can transform Africa. As of today, CARTA has 73 postdoctoral awards. 53 of them have been involved in split fellowship and re-entry grants. 47 were taken up in a one-year re-entry grant support, and one of them has been given a 2-year grant award. The main study objectives for the survey was basically to explore the impact of postdoctoral training on attainment of career development goals. It critically examined the major inhibitors to the attainment of greater impact, and it also drew on lessons for strengthening postdoctoral training across Africa. It was a mixed method survey with at least 24 participants being involved in the qualitative in-depth interviews. Thematic analysis was done in terms of the analysis for the survey. In terms of the results, the postdoctoral awards are highly competitive and are independently evaluated based on applicants' research, concepts, and research track records. The number of publications that one has a great impact on you receiving the postdoctoral grant award. In terms of career development, 4 key areas were looked at, and these include research, teaching, policy analysis, and scholarly advocacy. The impact of postdoctoral training on attainment of career goals, these have been mixed. However, they've offered the desired independence in terms of methodological and analytical focus that has advanced pursuit of self-initiated research. As I talk now, there are a few postdoctoral awardees that have been able to receive other awards from Wellcome Trust, for example, receiving a grant for £400,000. And I think CARTA is really moving forward. There is also more appreciated compared, the CARTA program is, the CARTA postdoctoral program is more appreciated compared to the nested postdoctoral project. In terms of professional exposure and scientific networks, this has led to an increase in publications. We have heard of the 3,300 publications so far, and the scholarly visibility, widened contacts, and research collaborations. Here is a quotation from one of the awardees. I was lucky to get a 2-year from a confidential grant, yes, and I was doing work on new HIV medicine. It's called DTG. So it's the new first line. So one of the offshoots of this finding, and which was very exciting to some entering the center, I found that this new drug causes sexual dysfunction among users. This was totally new. It had never been discovered in clinical trials. So CARTA helped me to help the world to discover an unknown side effect of this new drug, which is used by 38 million people across the world. And there's new interest around this, how this leads to sexual dysfunction. That was a male postdoctoral fellow. Another key issue that came out of this data is that there are inhibitors to attainment of greater postdoctoral career development, especially in terms of intrinsic factors such as readiness for career challenges, competitiveness, as well as resilience. A mentor responded to one of the questions when they were asked about what are the barriers in terms of development of postdoctoral careership under CARTA. The mentor said, the fellows need to develop the resilience to compete in the market. The professors they talk to about all these also compete in the same market, and that is the way it is. The world of research is a world of competition. That was a mentor responding to one of the questions. And I would like to clarify as well and say we are continuously in competition in research, but I like the message that has been, being shared from yesterday to today, that we are research leaders and we need to be, in a way, focused that we are going to face competition throughout as postdoctoral fellows. In terms of intrinsic factors, at institution of placement, there are issues of how do we balance work dynamics, the role strains and conflicts that arise as we are in close contact and interaction with our professors as well as other researchers. There is also the issue of absence of social and academic scientific interactions to facilitate collective learning, share mentoring resources for professionals, and development beyond the research gap. And one female postdoctoral fellow reiterated, yes, they, the mentors, do not feel the obligation. I have in mind, I need to give her time at least once a week or once a month. All that, I have not heard from her in 3 months, so I need to follow up. So you are in a free fall. In a way, the idea that the postdoc, the CARTA postdoctoral awards are not as structured tends to challenge the postdoc awardees, as they do not have that collective learning or that space when they can be able to relate with others in groups. What are some of the lessons in terms of strengthening the postdoctoral training that we can think of? And that is the reason why we are having this session today, because we have in our space Dr. Alicia Wade, as well as Professor Mphatso Kandaya. We also have our colleague Grace Mbutia and Professor Melody Menz-Ketz. In this discussion today, basically I'm going to briefly introduce our panelists this morning. Professor Mphatso Kandaya is an associate professor and executive dean of the School of Science and Technology at the Malawi University of Business and Applied Sciences, MUBAS. He is a member of the Research Consortium, the Transfer Project in Sub-Saharan Africa. He is the coordinator of the PhD and MPhil program in Applied Sciences in the School of Sciences and Technology. I'll move on to Grace. Grace is a lecturer and chair of the Department of Community Nursing at the Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology in Kenya. She holds a PhD in Public Health and Medical Anthropology, a Master's in Public Health, and a BSc in Nursing. Grace has great interest in implementation science research geared to care and support. Dr. Alicia Ward is a reader and clinician, scientist in the Department of Internal Medicine at the University of Witwatersrand. She is also a specialist physician and a chronologist in practice at the Wits Donald Gordon Medical Center, and an adjunct associate professor in the Division of Endocrinology, Diabetes, Metabolism at the University of Pennsylvania. She has published over 70 peer-reviewed articles and currently holds an Emerging Global Leader Career Development Award from the Fogarty International Center of National Institutes of Health in the USA. Until recently, she also co-chaired the Career Development Committee, which is one of the key areas that she's going to talk about in this discussion this morning. And lastly, but not least, our flow in terms of the format for our talk today, we'll first of all have Dr. Grace Mbutia, who is a beneficiary of the CARTA postdoctoral fellowship, and she's going to share her experience. Followed by Professor Mphatso Kamdaya, who is going to talk about the re-entry grant experience. And then we'll have reflections from Professor Alicia Ward as well as Dr. Melody, as they are going to talk in depth about the Career Development Program, as well as the peer learning for emerging researchers' knowledge and advancement, as the project is known as PECA from the University of Pretoria. At this moment, I will sit down so that we can start our conversation and see how far we can go. Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies, once again. At this moment, I'll ask Grace to just tell us briefly about your experience within the CARTA program.
Thank you very much, Blessing. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm humbled to share my experience of postdoctoral fellowship at the Brown University in the USA. It's good for me to speak to how did I find myself to the postdoc. 2 months after I graduated with my PhD, I was allocated 3 PhD students and 3 master's students to supervise as a first supervisor. And at that time, at the level of my career development, I didn't feel that I had the adequate skills and expertise for the role, and I needed to impact on these graduates just as that's the way I had been impacted in my training. And a year later, there was the call for CARTA postdoctoral awards. I had a choice to apply for the reentry grant or the postdoc. But then I thought, being a woman, by the way, the postdoc is not very friendly when you think about being away for 1 year. But then I examined my career development goals. What did I need? I felt that I needed more capacity building in my analytical research skills, in my writing skill. I needed more mentorship in postgraduate supervision. And I looked at the 2 opportunities, and I felt the CARTA postdoc opportunity that allows the fellow to develop your own training plan, have your own development goals, and achieve them in your own institution of choice, presented the best opportunity for me, and therefore I chose Brown University, and I developed a training plan which I shared with my mentor at Brown University. My mentor turned out to be very supportive. They were able to identify for me co-mentors for every aspect that I needed to achieve in my training plan. And I was able to achieve all the training goals that I had set out. I must say that the SPH fellowship, CARTA postdoctoral fellowship, where I was able to spend a few months in the US and spend another period in my country, for me was a great motivation that enabled me to see the postdoc as visible. And I was able to achieve the goals that I had set out. Were there any challenges that I faced? I think one of the key challenges that I would want to speak to, even as we try to reimagine the postdoctoral training, is that I felt I lacked the collaborative, I wondered, is there a way to collaborate with other CARTA postdoctoral fellows that are going through similar training needs and similar experiences? And at the time, I actually wanted to write a systematic review, which was one of the key areas that I wanted to develop. And I had to reach out to one of the CARTA graduates who was also doing their own re-entry grant. We successfully were able to do the systematic review. We collaborated in other publications. And I feel this is something that we could think about even as we reimagine the CARTA postdoctoral fellowship. I felt that the experiences that I achieved at Brown University and also the training, the CARTA training model for my PhD training were very key in shaping. They have extremely been vital in shaping my experience. And even as when I went back to my university, I was promoted to be the chair of department. I was also appointed to be the chair of the postgraduate committee, where I coordinate the PhD training and the master's. And my experiences have been very important in shaping the training, and we have been able to have a timely completion. I started monthly seminars, journal clubs, and these have really been helpful. And I feel without CARTA, I would not be an impactful academia as I am today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Grace, for that comment. I would like to just ask you one question. In terms of the, we all know that the CARTA program, postdoctoral program, is not as structured as you would want it to be. What new thing do you think you would like to introduce to the CARTA postdoctoral program to make it more structured?
Thank you very much, Blessing. As I have mentioned in my brief experience, is that the CARTA postdoctoral is quite unstructured, which for me was a strength at first because you're able to come up with your own training goals and take advantage. So what did I need at that time? I needed to be mentored to be a better supervisor. And then I have a choice to choose the institution that I have to go to. So it is a strength. But at the same time, there is the challenge that you do not have any people you're sharing. There should be some shared learning experiences. So for me, I'm thinking that if we can have some structure whereby these CARTA postdoctoral fellows are coming together, are collaborating, probably they could support each other and the learning experiences would even be better. That would be my suggestion.
Thank you very much, Grace. Now we move on to Professor Kanaya. Please let us know much more about your experiences within the re-entry grant. Thank you.
Thank you very much, moderator. The experiences are many, but this afternoon I would like to just focus on one particular experience, which I think is tied to the discussion of the day, that is early career researchers. My re-entry grant actually was given after I had done 2 postdocs here at Wits, and it came
with a set of conditions. And it is those conditions that actually defined my working condition as an early career researcher. I would like to pause and then explain more on what I mean by the working conditions. And in this case, I will cite just 4 points. Number 1, the CARTA re-entry grant actually improved my access to resources for my research. I'm talking about resources from my university that supported my research. And number 2, actually, the CARTA re-entry grant improved my financial stability and independence in terms of how we wanted to do research in our school. And by that, we ended up actually recruiting new PhD and master's students, and it included actually supervising CARTA PhD students, and some of them actually graduated. And number 3, the CARTA re-entry grant actually gave me an opportunity for decision-making power in managing a research grant. And of course, the last point is that it gave me an opportunity to train myself as a responsible supervisor for postgrads. And of course, as I was doing my research, again, I had to experience of being a research leader in my field. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mpatso. Before we go to Professor Alicia, I have a question for you. There are so many CARTA fellows that are in this room that would like to take up either a postdoc or a re-entry grant. What advice would you give to them?
So my advice would be that, first of all, you have to create an intentional awareness of the type of journey that you want to undertake as a research leader in an academia, and of course the type of research that you want to be doing, and the type of research that you would want to be known for. Once you define those parameters, then you can apply for the research re-entry grant, and that actually will give you an opportunity to decide on the type of collaborations that you would like to be involved in, and of course the type of research grant cause that you would want to spend your time on. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Alicia, you have been a coordinator for a development career program at Wits, and you have heard what the CARTA postdoctoral program has been doing for the past 5 years. I would like you to give us a reflection of these 2 programs moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Blessings, and thank you to the organizers for the invitation to speak to you all today. Before I get into my substantive reflections, it was quite interesting for me to hear the presentation that you made on behalf of Alex, in which he said that research was a competition. And it's not just a competition at postdoctoral level. To lead a life in research is to lead a life in competition. And really to be successful in that competition means that you have to be prepared. And if I may be allowed to extend a sports analogy, the question is, how do you get from being one of the squad to getting on the field? And you don't want to be warming the bench, you want to be out there and you want to be playing. And I think it's important to understand that those times of transitions are periods of vulnerability. from that transition to being a doctoral fellow, to being a postdoc, and then from a postdoc to early career researcher. And those are the periods of time in which we lose people from the research pipeline. And I was also thinking, as I listened to Grace, I listened to Impacto, who've had successful careers, I couldn't help but wonder, what about the others? What happens to those CARTA fellows and other PhD students who don't get postdocs, who don't get additional support, who don't get re-entry grants? What happens to them in terms of their career development? And how can we do more to support them? And really the career development program that we've established in the School of Public Health grew out of some of those concerns. And understanding that not everyone has had an excellent doctoral experience, for example, not everyone is extremely self-motivated, and not everyone will know where to go for support as they develop their career. And so what we wanted to do was to set up a formalized program within the school that took account of these kinds of considerations and really provided a scaffolding that allowed not just the postdocs, but other early career and even mid-career researchers to develop as they wanted to progress in their career. So to that end, we set up a program that has multiple elements. I think one of the main elements has been a formalized mentorship program in which we send out an open invitation really to those people who want to be mentored in the school, and then match them with mentees. I see my co-chair Lenore Manderson in the audience, who's also been quite involved with CARTA, and really match them with mentors. And what we have had excellent feedback from the program. People who have benefited from it have really thought it's been instrumental in career advancement, but it hasn't been a program without its challenges. So one of the challenges has been, obviously, each of us is overburdened. We all have a lot of work to do. And the question has been, how do we identify mentors, one, and two, incentivize mentors to want to work with students? I mean, I think, Grace, you mentioned that your mentor at Brown was excellent. Not everybody has that experience of mentorship. And the question is, how does one incorporate mentorship as something that is part of one's academic responsibility? It's not just, writing papers and teaching classes, but you also have a responsibility to bring the next generation of researchers through. And also having to convey to the mentees that the responsibility for mentorship, in fact, lies with them. They have to take the initiative to make sure that they get from their mentors the things that they need. Again, everybody is busy, and it's usually the squeaky wheel that gets the oil. So if you want to have a successful mentorship experience, it's also important that you are the driver of that experience. But in addition to kind of these bilateral relationships that we've created, we've also worked quite hard to create a community. So a community of researchers, a community of people who are facing the same kinds of struggles. So I see Jane Good up there in the audience, and we've been working with Jane, who heads up our research committee with Sumaya Mall here in the school, to develop grant writing workshops. So again, trying to create a community of people who are going through the same experiences, whether it's grant writing, whether it's a weekly 4-hour session that we convene for people who are actively working on research papers, but just a sense that you're not in this alone, that there's a community around you, and that there's ongoing support beyond that which is provided by your mentor or your department.
Fantastic. Before you move on, we have young people, young scholars, who are maybe in their late 20s or early 30s. How can we define success as a postdoc?
So I am always of the opinion that the definition of success is a very individual one. My definition of success is not going to be your definition of success. Yes. And I have what some may view as somewhat controversial views in terms of how one should plan. I think you should do what makes you happy. I think that there is a mantra in terms of you get on a certain hamster wheel and you have to do this, you have to get your PhD, you have to be the... Do what makes you happy. Do what makes sense for you within the context of your personal relationships in terms of your professional goals. And allow yourself to step outside that straitjacket that we sometimes impose on yourselves. Okay. And I'll say that.
Thank you very much. Quickly, we'll move on to Professor Melody. You also have reflections for us in terms of the postdoctoral and peer learning program within University of Pretoria. How does that really relate to the postdoctoral program at CARTA and the School of Public Health? Thank you.
Thank you, Blessings, and maybe for that prophetic promotion to professor in the hopefully not too forever distant future. So just by means of quick introduction, I'm Dr. Melody Mens-Kutsia. I work at the University of Pretoria, where I wear multiple hats. One of those hats is in the hands-on management of a fellowship program for fellows in the post-PhD phase, working on food systems related projects. And then I think more relevantly, the reason for my invitation today was that we have recently completed a project where we worked with 10 different post-PhD career development programs on the continent. And we analyzed and worked with them to understand how they do the post-PhD training. And from that process have tried to understand what are the lessons, what are the principles, what are the guidelines that we could share more broadly to help researchers, to help programs, to help funders, to help science councils think about how should post-PhD training be conceptualized and implemented so that really we have a pipeline of researchers on the continent. So most of my remarks that I'm making are grounded in the experience from that project, and that was the PERCA project that Blessings mentioned. And I'm going to reflect specifically on this question of whether a post-PhD program, which often is a postdoc, should be a structured program or it should be an unstructured program. And I think we've heard from our two CARTA postdocs today the benefits of an unstructured program and that level of independence that you can establish, but also some of the benefits that could come from structure. And that includes aspects of social support and that peer learning, which we have learned is so embedded in the CARTA philosophy. So maybe just one comment on this issue of competition in academia. I agree that it's a highly competitive space and we have to be resilient and we have to train people to be resilient. But more and more we're also seeing that we're not going to tackle our big research challenges and our big societal problems if we can't work collaboratively. So you almost live in this tension of you've got to be competitive, but we can't win if we don't collaborate. And I think that is also something that we really have to be instilling in the next generation, is that ability and willingness to work together. So, key lessons from PERCA really is that there's no one size fits all. There's no one model that's going to work in every single context, and you need to look at your particular program and your particular postdoc and its objectives to understand whether a structured program is relevant or not relevant. We also have to remember that the purpose of a postdoc is to help prepare a young researcher for a research career. Now, increasingly that research career might not be within academia, but nonetheless, it's probably a research-based career. And so the postdoc has to have a strong focus on those research skills, but also on those transferable skills that we've heard about. That ability to lead a project and make your own decisions about a project. Financial management, all of those skills that are required to truly be a leader in the research world. So, to structure or not to structure, I think you should ask two key questions. The one is, in a program like CARTA, where you have a cohort-based approach essentially, are there skills that the postdocs come into the program with that tend to be common across the cohort? And the linked question to that is, are these skills that it would be difficult for your mentors or supervisors to be able to impart. So if you're in a situation where a cohort of postdocs have a common skills development need and their supervisors are not well matched to that, that might be a situation where a structured training intervention would be particularly valuable. I think CARTA's advantage is the strength of its PhD training. And because you know the training that your PhDs have had, it is almost easier to be able to identify if there are skills gaps. Also because it's a well-established program, over time you will have been able to pick up and see what are the things that our postdocs are commonly struggling with, or that we're not able to fully develop during the PhD period. But of course, there's also practical things that need consideration. You have to balance the amount of time that a postdoc is spending in formal training versus the amount of time that they have for research. And you don't want to overload a postdoc with training and undermine research time. You need to think of the practical considerations of implementing a training. Will people be able to, at the same time, have time off, or is something online and asynchronous possibly an option? So we tend to think of the grand ideals and how nice something would be without considering the practical implications of that. And so in making the decision about whether or not to structure, I think those are really key. If there is not something that is really systematically a need or a skill that the cohort needs to develop to be successful in their careers, I think the use of training plans and personal development plans can really be a powerful tool in the postdoctoral fellowship. And I'm sure, and I've heard, that these are developed, but they can also be used by program teams quite effectively to create additional support structures, check-in spaces, and could really link fellows to the type of training that they as an individual need for their particular career development. So at the end, I conclude that it's not a single factor that influences a decision on whether a program should be structured or not. It's multifaceted, and I look forward to the questions and conversations.
I think a quick question to you, because we are running out of time, is how can we reimagine the CARTA postdoctoral fellowship moving forward? I think I'll just need one statement from each of our panelists, and we are good to go. Thank you.
Are we starting with me?
Yes.
Or are we starting on that end?
Either way.
Okay, since I have the mic, I've been elected. I think really one thing we can look at is, as I said, try to broaden the support. So we may not be able to give financial support to everyone for re-entry grants and sabbaticals, etc., but see how the kinds of support that doesn't necessarily come with financial implications, how we can broaden that, so you don't lose the investment that you've made in developing the CARTA Fellows.
For me, I would recommend that we have now reached a point where we have to involve more of the CARTA graduates, because now we have got the 10th cohort. I was in cohort 1, 2010. So let's involve them more in actually maybe facilitating and of course writing grants. Thank you.
Thank you. I think mine would be what the panelists are saying. There is no one model that fits all. I think going forward, it's good that the CARTA postdoctoral could have some aspect of open, where the fellows are able to develop their own research training plan, but then have some formal way that these fellows are meeting and are having some shared learning, so that they can be able to develop a common learning experience. Thank you.
My last thought would be that we need to look for experiential learning opportunities. So in addition to structured training, what are the ways that we could get postdocs involved in teams with senior researchers and scientists on proposals or papers where they get the experience of on-the-ground developing a really competitive, excellent proposal or paper?
Thank you very much, Dr. Melody. At this juncture, I would like to invite the professors that are in the house. You're going to receive some emails from some of us because we are moving forward. We have been enlightened and we have been motivated that we are research leaders. And moving forward, I'll be sending Professor Leno, Professor I'm looking at someone and they're saying I shouldn't name them. That's why but I would look forward to sending something to Professor Sharon, Professor Mola, Macpherson Malewade, my VC, and definitely our colleagues from the University of Wits, Professor Christovides. Thank you very much, the CARTA Secretariat, for this time and for ensuring that the young people, the young scholars, early career researchers are being given a chance, and we're very proud to be...
Colleagues, thank you very much for sticking to time. Due to time constraints, we're not going to go into a Q&A, but I found that session very, very fascinating, a lot of insights that came from there. Our next session is going to deal with two F words that is very important in research. It's funding and fundraising. If you were thinking anything else, taper your thoughts. But I'm going to hand over to Dr. Evelyn Gitau, who's going to be moderating this session. Thanks so much.
Thanks, and thank you, everyone. I always bring out the gender aspect in my conversations, and now I'm the lady sandwiched between these two gentlemen. Good afternoon. We are the panel holding you for lunch, so we're going to try and make it as exciting as we can. I want to say a privileged position because we are grantees who receive funding to try and build capacity, and today I have the privilege to ask a few probing questions with some of our funders. One of the things that we struggle with, for those of us who think about capacity strengthening and building programs for capacity strengthening, is the fact that getting funding for it is not as easy as we make it seem. When Sharon and Catherine were presenting the data on how much funding has gone into CARTA, it's sleepless nights, a lot of road shows. Alex, who spoke to us this morning, was here when CARTA was founded. They spent a lot of time trying to convince many funders the utility and importance of funding research across the continent and capacity building across the continent. So that said, it's a competition. I like the analogy of the run. There's a lot of capacity strengthening that's been happening on the continent. You can go back almost 50 years to look at what's been happening trying to build research capacity on the continent. And so we have models and we have competitors. And we think the CARTA model has been successful in showing that it is useful, and that's why we can talk about $35 million, I think, Sharon, is that correct, that has been put into the CARTA model. But we need more because we've only got 245 fellows. And if we're going to get 10,000 PhD fellows per year on the continent, CARTA, as one of the contributors to that 10,000, needs more support, at least for our next 10 years. So today we have two of our funders amongst the few that have funded CARTA since 2011. Our first funder, actually, SIDA, the Swedish Research Cooperation Unit, has been one of the main funders of CARTA since its inception, since 2012. And so all 245 fellows in CARTA have been directly supported by SIDA in one way or another. And in addition, of the postdocs that you had here today, 16 of our postdocs have also received direct funding. So on my right, we have Marcus Moll, Dr. Marcus Moll, who's been working with us and is a CEDA focal point for many things, but is now the support that we have here in CARTA. And if you want to read more of his bio, it is in the booklet, who will speak to us a little bit about the why of CARTA since 2011, and perhaps give us some suggestions as to what we need to think about. And then on my left, we have Dr. Alphonsus Neba, who has been the program, our contact, our focal point at the Science Foundation Africa, and who was there from the inception of the Deltas program. And Deltas came in 2016. Cohort 6 was where they started supporting CARTA. So they have helped us support 106 fellows, 20 postdocs, and one of the exciting things about the current funding that we have from Deltas is that the 2 research hubs that will be receiving $250,000 each after a bit of competition, the funding is coming from Delta. So that's exciting because that's a new model that we're trying to test to see how we can expand some of the things that we've been doing in CARTA. So you've heard a lot about CARTA. You've heard a lot about why research capacity strengthening on the continent is enough. But I'll hand over my first question to you, Marcus, and ask you, you're a repeat funder. And I think we're in our 4th or 5th cycle of funding from CEDA. So why is it that you have supported us for that long? And what is it that you think needs to happen to have a long-term enterprise that allows sustainable research capacity strengthening to happen on the continent?
Thank you very much, Evelyn. First of all, let me say it is a great pleasure to be here to attend the CARTA conference and to represent CEDA, the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, in this panel. And I would also like to take the opportunity to say that CEDA is a proud funder of the CARTA program, and I would like to congratulate the 2 co-chairs, the whole CARTA program, the partners, and of course the fellows, for the enormous success of the program, and also for the launch of the online curricula today. And the easy answer to your question is, we are long-term funders of the CARTA program because it is a successful program. You're delivering the results that you have promised to deliver. And maybe I have to go one step back. CEDA is a government agency, and we get our instructions and our own funding from the Swedish government. And then the work at the Research Cooperation Unit where I work, where I'm placed, is governed by a strategy from the Swedish government. And that strategy is entitled Sweden's Development Cooperation in Research for Poverty Reduction and Sustainable Development. And in this strategy, and now I have to read to get it right, we have, it's a new strategy. We got it only last year, and it will run until 2028. There are 3 focus areas, and the first one is then enhanced research capacity and sustainable research environments. The second one is enhanced global, regional, and national research that is of relevance to the least developed countries and regions. And then thirdly, enhanced impact of research that is of relevance to poverty reduction and sustainable development. And I guess it is quite obvious that the focus areas of this strategy are very much in line or aligned with the CARTA program. And that is, of course, also one of the reasons, and we had a similar strategy before with similar focus areas, why we are continued funders of the CARTA program. So when we report back to our government, then of course, it is nice to be able to report about the success of the CARTA program and to show how it really aligns with our focus areas. And then I also would like to mention, you said that we started, or the first funding phase started in 2012. It was then renewed in 2017. And now we are discussing actually about the potential 3rd funding phase. It's not 4 or 5, it's 3. Maybe, we will see. And of course, I mean, we wouldn't have that discussion if the program would not deliver. I mean, it is both the capacity strengthening at the individual and institutional level, but also then, of course, the research in itself. At that time at CEDA, but when there were the first or initial dialogue going on between CEDA and CARTA, may have been in 2010-11 or so, the people at CEDA were a little bit hesitant or skeptic about this new approach of promoting the collaboration between African institutions, and they thought it may be a bit risky. But when we look back now, I mean, it seems taking that risk was very worth it. And maybe for the moment I will stop there.
Thanks, Marcus, and we're really glad that you chose to take the risk, because I think in innovation, if you don't take the risk, you actually don't get the benefits and long-term benefits. Of course, the reason you say 3 phases, but there are little things like the mitigation grant during COVID that enabled us to do a lot of what we did to support some of the fellows to get over that hump during COVID. But I'll turn over to you, Alphonsus, because you came in the middle of what had happened. So in 2016, we were at cohort 6. We as CARTA were saying we need more because we now have more fellows in the pipeline and we're moving forward. We have some who need postdoctoral support. What was your thinking when you were looking? It was a competition. We ended up one amongst 11 who were funded in the first round, and we are really glad to have gotten a second round of deltas in this current phase. What was your thinking when you said, okay, CARTA is a good program? I know it's very different from many of the other deltas programs. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Evelyn, for that question. Let me start by maybe making a little pitch of my own. And you can be assured that it's not like the Coca-Cola pitch, which was compared to a mosquito bringing malaria. My pitch is more about a bee bringing pollen to fertilize your plants. I'm from the Science for Africa Foundation. We are a Pan-African not-for-profit private charitable organization that funds science, strengthens science ecosystems, and promotes research on the continent. The CARTA program is one of 11 programs that we funded from 2016 to the tune of $100 million. And the CARTA program, again, is one of 14 programs that we are funding in Delta's phase 2 to the tune of about $70 million. And of course, we are supported by Welcome and FCDO. I'm happy to see Jordan is here, so I need to acknowledge Jordan's presence because they have been a partner in providing funding for CARTA and all the other programs that we support. Yes, it's a highly competitive program. Why did we get involved? The Delta's Africa program has got a theory of change, and some of the pillars for that theory of change, what CARTA and all these other programs proposed resonated very well with the pillars. So the first one is that we are interested in building a critical mass of globally competitive research leaders on the continent. These leaders, we hope, will be able to develop and drive a locally relevant research agenda, generate data that will be able to inform policy and decision-making to address some of the challenges that we are facing as a continent. Talking about critical mass, we don't only look at it in terms of research leaders that are Africa-led and trained on the continent. We are looking also at a critical mass of very strong research institutions on the continent. We also include a critical mass of research support staff and other resources on the continent, such that all these ecosystem strengthening activities will be able to generate data and build Africans to be able to begin to address our challenges as Africans. CARTA met that bill very, very strongly in a competitive process. The second pillar has to do with research quality. So we are interested in improving the research quality that comes out of the continent. We want to have graduates that are competitive. They can stand on their own. They can publish in high-impact journals, this Nature, the Science, and you name them. We also want to have graduates that are able to attract additional funding to be able to continue doing research on the continent. We want to have graduates who are able to generate data and make recommendations for policies. And again, CARTA performs very well on this particular score, along with the other programs that we are funding. The third one is strengthening research training on the continent. We've spent the past 2 days talking about the CARTA model, the CARTA curriculum, and I think there is no doubt in anybody's mind right here that the CARTA program or curriculum is at the top of the pack as far as PhD training on the continent is concerned. And then we are also very much interested in what we call scientific citizenship. In other words, we want to foster collaboration between scientists and various stakeholders, including policymakers and other people who are not scientists. We've been able to demonstrate through this program that it is very, very important because it encourages a two-way perspective where, as scientists, you are able to learn from these other communities and they are also able to learn from you in order to find common solutions, so workable solutions to the problems that we are facing. Again, I believe that CARTA has performed admirably well in this score as well. And then the third pillar is that of building resilient research environments where we could have graduates trained in such environments and they come out and they can stand on their own and compare with graduates who come out of Oxford, Harvard, and all the other top-tier universities around the world. Again, that involves a lot of things. Having mentorship programs, having PhD supervision training, having maybe necessary equipment, having the necessary policies. I mean, I sit here and I learn about policies around re-entry grants, policies around supporting maybe women who are, or CARTA fellows who maybe are having babies, and it resonates again very well with us. So these are just some of the reasons that as long as you keep your side of the bargain and remain competitive, I'm sure when we have Delta's phase 3, you will again stand your grounds and we will continue to do the good work that we are doing.
Thank you. So it's nice when it's the people who make you compete that are selling and tooting your horn for you. But I know there have been, when we get reviewers' comments for our applications, there are always a couple of things that make us uncomfortable because our DNA as CARTA is we are interdisciplinary and we are broad. We are not perhaps like many of the Delta's programs that you've talked about who have specific research questions, and so they're building capacity around specific research questions. And maybe even, well, I'll first ask Alphonsus the question, but Marcus, for you is maybe to address the differences you see in some of the programs that you funded. I know you do a lot of bilateral, but you also have some specific ones that fund specific work. But you've still funded CARTA, irrespective of the fact that that question that is asked, what are your research questions? When we're sitting with Sharon and Catherine and the program managers trying to answer that question in the application, we're like, but this is not CARTA. We are not a program that can answer what are your research questions. So perhaps first, for Deltas 3, as you're thinking about it, just remove that question so that we don't have to think about it. But more broadly is, what has made you then perhaps shift and think about why to fund CARTA in that way?
I think we can all agree that the challenges that we face as humanity and specifically as African, they are multidimensional and they are very complex. And sometimes, if not most of the times, we need an and multidisciplinary approach to be able to address these problems. Most of the times you need the skills, the expertise from different disciplines to bring to bear on a particular problem or challenge in research if you were to look at, if you were to get maybe the best kind of solution. And I think it is in this regard that we increasingly recognize that multidisciplinary research is very, very important. If we develop the skills that we require to function in this area, we will always find workable solutions and bring in new innovations that are able to address problems that maybe the single disciplines are unable to address effectively.
Thanks. Marcus, as you respond to that, maybe you can also respond to another thing that we are struggling with as CARTA, and this is from a CEDA perspective, is that our universities come from low and middle income countries and those that are middle income, like in South Africa. And so there's a tension, I think, between what you as CEDA fund and even, I think, FCDO, for that matter, may fund and consider as fundable within your strategy.
Thanks, Evelyn. Maybe we'll start with the first one. So I don't see that there's any problem with that CEDA is supporting an organization like, or a program like CARTA that is focusing on capacity building or strengthening at the same time as promoting interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary or multidisciplinary research. Because, I mean, if you build research capacity, I mean, then you want that research is done. And if you want that research is done, I mean, then that research should have some type of effect, some type of impact, of course. And then I can go back again to our strategy, I mean, with the 3 different focus areas that are very much aligned with these 3 other points. And of course, I mean, we are working with synergies, or at least complementarity, between the focus areas and within the focus areas. And there, I mean, if CARTA combines capacity strengthening, research of relevance and impact, I mean, that is, of course, very important. And then when you think about what the world looks like today, all these multidimensional challenges, I mean, climate change, loss of biodiversity, how that is connected to health, maybe non-communicable diseases, mental health or infectious diseases, vector-borne diseases, or issues like AMR, antimicrobial resistance, that are so complex. I mean, you really need strong, sustainable research environments with a lot of capacity that then can harbor these multidisciplinary research approaches. And I mean, it's the same way we are working our bilateral research cooperation programs. I don't know if people know what that is, but we have programs where we are focusing on one university in certain countries, and where we provide support so that these universities can transform into research universities. And there we are supporting also doctoral education, and then also in a systems approach, I mean, the surrounding, the research support functions that you need to really build and have and sustain a research university. And we have 4 of such cooperation programs in Africa, and that is with Ethiopia, Mozambique, Tanzania, and Rwanda. And just last year, after 20 years, we ended our cooperation with Makerere University and Uganda, and it was a very great success. So, I mean, it's not really uncommon for CEDA, I mean, to focus at 2 or 3 things at the same time. And then to your second point, I mean, it's of course an issue, but I think, first of all, I would like to say that the model that CARTA has developed and implemented, I mean, strong and successful South-South collaborations is really great. And then you're, of course, involving non-African partners where that is needed. But I learned yesterday during dinner, actually, I mean, that this need for input from the non-African partners is getting less and less, and that tells you, of course, something about the success of the program and the competence and capacity that you have here at the African continent. Then, of course, we have again our strategy, and in the strategy it says that our work should focus on the least developed countries and regions, and that is a political decision. And then, of course, we have to think about where CEDA's support is needed the most and where we have the highest chances or possibilities of achieving some type of impact or change. So, I mean, that is certainly a discussion that will continue also between CARTA and CEDA as we are discussing a potential third funding phase.
So before I turn to the audience who I would love to have engaged in this conversation, there are a couple of things we see different in different funders, and one of them is the idea that some, and 1 or 2 have supported us by just giving us core support and saying, plug it in where you think it is important in the CARTA program. And so, we plug it in wherever. So that means it's easy to just tell them, all our fellows are doing great. These are the outputs, and they're happy because they see the impact as a collaborative work between all funders. But then there are others, and I'm sitting here between 2 of them, who want to be very prescriptive or be very specific about what the funding will go into based on their strategy. So this question is for both of you. Do you see merits in either way? Because when I said CEDA has supported all 245 fellows, it's because, like the jazzes are some of the things where we put all our funders' money and say all fellows go through the jazzes and this is where it is. So it's very hard for me to say 10 fellows were funded by CEDA because a lot of the different interventions are funded indirectly or directly by the funders. So do you see merits in the core funding model versus the very prescriptive model where you want us to tell you fellow 1 and 10 were given funding from deltas or not? Or is there a possibility, as you're thinking about your next strategy, to start considering that we have demonstrated that we can manage core funding appropriately to plug it in and still give you the benefit of knowing and being able to report your impact? I know it's a complicated question. You can answer it any way you want.
Indeed, it's a very complicated question. But let me start off by saying that there are advantages and disadvantages in both models. Where funding is not limiting, co-funding could be a very good model to pursue. Co-funding is important in many ways. We know that most of our institutions on the continent, they suffer some high degree of lack in terms of funding, in terms of other resources. And therefore, providing core funding gives a lot of institutions the flexibility and adaptability to be able to build their infrastructure, to be able to build critical mass, maybe address issues of interest or research priorities that they want, and maybe retain talented staff as well. So that in the long run would actually have a very solid infrastructure or environment in which to train maybe fellows when they are recruited. On the other hand, when funding is limiting, we make the assumption that we could get institutions that are well established, maybe like APHRC or Wits University, to partner with other institutions that are able to work together to deliver some specific work packages. In other words, we call this balancing excellence with equity. So you have, say, APHRC partnering with Wits in the CARTA program, but then identifying other universities like Nairobi, Moi, Ibadan, Ife, and potentially you could extend to universities in Guinea-Bissau or Liberia or Sierra Leone to be able to do more with less. So you are able to use the expertise that you've built over the years in the research enterprise area to extend these to improve research and the environment in other universities without the possibility of giving them core funding. So you can imagine that you've been able to train a lot of CARTA fellows, maybe from all these universities, probably without extending any significant core funding to all these other participating institutions. So it's neither here nor there. I believe that both models work and they could actually cohabit together for maximum impact.
Thanks, Alphonsus. I can only agree. Maybe there doesn't need to be such a big difference between core funding and program support, I would say. And I wouldn't agree that CEDA is so prescriptive in a way. I think it all depends also on, I mean, you need respect and you need to have a dialogue, actually. And when the starting point is ownership and the programmatic priorities of the partner organization, I mean, then you can develop something together. If you call that core support or program support doesn't matter, but in the end, I mean, the funder and the partner organization are striving towards the same aim, and I guess that is what CEDA is trying to do with its partner organizations, and I hope that also the CARTA people perceive it like that when we have our dialogue. And then you were talking about counting outputs and outcome. I mean, there may be a little bit of a difference between the private funders, foundations, and the government agencies. Because, I mean, when you report to the private organizations, I mean, they either like what you report or they don't like it, and then they will decide, I mean, to continue the support or saying you that something needs to be changed. But our chain is a little bit longer. I mean, we get your reports about the outcome and outputs, but then we have to report to our government what has been done with the Swedish taxpayers' money. And there we have to be very careful how we write the story. Because, I mean, the people at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs or even the politicians, they will not understand the technical reports. I mean, they don't know what JASs are or TOTs. I mean, that we cannot report to them because then they will say, I mean, this is a waste of taxpayers' money. So there we need to really talk about what was the impact, what has changed, what has been achieved, I mean, and then linking back to the strategy, poverty reduction, sustainable development, and maybe also in the long run even being able to tell, I mean, what's in it for Sweden? I mean, that is a side aspect, of course, but this type of finding the right tone and the details in the storytelling is in the reporting is really, really important.
Yeah, and I like that point you've left us at, because sometimes the fellows struggle to give us the impact story, and actually the impact stories from the fellows feed into the types of reports that Sweden have to show impact. I'm going to allow for 2 questions from the audience before we wrap up. I know I saw Torkild had his hand from Bergen. Is there any other question in the audience? And our Vice Chancellor from Makerere. So Torkild.
We have talked a lot about CARTA success and the CARTA model, etc. But there is one element that we haven't mentioned, and that is scholarships. One of the reasons I think CARTA is successful is that the PhD candidates actually access scholarships during their training. And in the long run, funded PhD candidates will have a greater achievement rate than unfunded candidates. One of the problems I see on the African continent is that there are so many candidates that are unfunded. When we are now moving away from cohorts in CARTA, institutionalizing the model, but we are not institutionalizing the stipends, or I haven't heard about that at least. So that's like the elephant in the room that nobody is mentioning, but that everybody identifies, I think.
Thanks, Torkild. I like that, and because we have some VCs in the room, those scholarships and how we institutionalize them would be great. Prof?
Thank you very much. Mine is just to give a testimony because the colleague from SIDA mentioned Makerere, and I want to say that I don't think I have seen.
I would like to say, I mean, continue with what you have doing in the past and what you are strong at. I mean, you're so knowledgeable, and continue with that. And then I would also recommend, I mean, this storytelling part. I mean, if you, of course, funding is really an essential issue, and you need to convince other funders. Some are sitting here in the audience, maybe, or have left. So work on this storytelling and what really the program is about, the impact, how you will change the academic and universities on the African continent, why that is needed, and what that will result in the end. Maybe that is the short answer from my side.
I come from a culture that says you don't change a winning team. But that doesn't mean that the winning team cannot innovate. Because if you fail to innovate, and then someone else is going to outcompete you. And therefore, as you think about your strategy, you need to think about other innovations that you can bring on board in terms of quite a number of things. I think in the funding world, we appreciate the concept of co-funding quite a bit. And for the vice chancellors that are present in the room, you need to figure out how you could be part of co-funding, because co-funding unlocks more funding from the funding community. One of the Delta's 14 programs at the University of Cape Town, when they received the 4 points, when they received the grant, they actually topped up with, I can't remember whether it was 5 million rands into the program, but something of that nature. So at the end of the day, if you cultivate the culture of actually volunteering to squeeze within your own limited budgets to put up some co-funding within the CARTA programs, then you can be sure that you will be able to unlock more funding from a number of other funders who are interested in the model. I think previously we did talk about the feasibility of maybe bringing in other universities or more universities in terms of contributing towards building the critical mass. So you would need to really figure out what criteria you need to develop to identify and bringing in more partners. And perhaps also for the partner institutions, have you thought of maybe actually going independent model? So instead of having APHRC and Wits as the hub, you could then have the University of Ibadan as a new hub, having other universities adopt the same model so that we can spread the concept around the continent. It's not easy to train 10,000 PhDs per year, but I'm sure we can have different strategies and work collaboratively with funding partners, the private sector, and governments to be able to do this. Let me just end this discussion by just telling all of you a story. I don't know how much you know about Wellcome Trust. Wellcome was set up by Sir Henry Wellcome when he passed away, and willed that his fortune be used to set up the foundation of the trust to fund medical and health research across the world. I always wonder how many wealthy Africans do we have, millionaires, and what happens to their fortunes when they pass away, especially when you think of the impact that Wellcome funding has brought across the world and not only on the continent. So it probably takes some kind of mindset change in how we deal with our estates beyond the immediate confines of our family members, because they too live in a broader world, and all the issues that we're facing in terms of climate change, in terms of health, also affect them. So just food for thought on how we could try to mobilize more resources for research on the continent.
Thank you, Alphonsus. So as we close, I think I really want to appreciate the two of you, because I know some of the questions asked were not the type you want to respond to in public, but you did. But more importantly is also showing to us that validating what we do as CARTA from a funding perspective is important. We have FCDO in the house. We had the Gates Foundation represented earlier, and actually a lot of the questions the senior advisor who was here was asking you was, how do we scale up some of the things that you're talking about? So I think the scale up model, we need to work on it, whether it's Ibadan becoming a new hub of CARTA and ensuring that hub, that's one of our mainstreaming strategies. But even the scale up at individual level, what does that look like? And the other thing is the impact. So that particular funder, Gates, wants us to quantify everything in DALIs. I don't know how we do that when it comes to capacity strengthening, but I think we have research leaders here who can become creative and find a way to take that dollar that has come from Alphonsus and Sida and put a DALI to it. So maybe hopefully we can do that quickly, so that we can unlock more funding. I want to thank everyone. It's lunchtime. I know we've taken a lot of your time, but thank you so much for listening, and thank you for participating.